Since childhood, I have always been fascinated by rocket engines. Every time the space shuttle launch or any other rocket launch was announced, I was glued to the screen. The enormous power of a controlled explosion inevitably drew me to this field. I had already completed my bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech and was now pursuing my master's degree. I wanted to become a rocket scientist. Born into a middle-class family, my parents helped me with my tuition fees as best they could, and I covered the rest of my needs with student loans. I had long been considered a botanist, and I was proud of this title. Because I was working so hard on my life's goal, I had not yet started meeting girls at university. Sure, I was a frat guy, but not the type of jock that girls gravitated towards. Last week, I noticed that an attractive girl was watching me in the campus cafeteria, where I always ate lunch to save time on studying. I used to see her with some guy, but for the past week she's been sitting alone, smiling shyly when I look at her. I was pleased to receive smiles from the opposite sex, but making time for relationships was not part of my plans, until others decided for me. "Hi, I'm Sharon Appleby," she introduced herself, sitting down next to me at the table. Hi, I'm Keith Carlisle. How are you?" "Oh, I know who you are. You've already completed your bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and now you're pursuing a master's degree, which is a remarkable achievement. You've been on the top list since the beginning and are known as one of the smartest guys on campus, if not the smartest." "Well, I'm not sure about that. There are many others who can challenge your conclusions, but I really work hard." "How did you know so much about me?" I asked. I was working up the courage to approach you and wanted to know something about you so I could start a conversation. "Well, Sharon, you know a lot about me, so what's your story?" "I'm also a student here, just like you, but I study at the Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts at Georgia Tech. I hope to earn a bachelor's degree in philosophy with a minor in art. I love to think, and I've been thinking about you a lot lately," she laughed. What is it about me that would interest an attractive woman like you?" I cleverly played along. I had dates and relationships before and during university. There was even one guy who I thought could be the one, but unfortunately we went our separate ways. It made me rethink my life and where I was headed. I have goals and desires like everyone else, but thanks to my philosophy courses, I learned to be practical. I want to hitch my cart to a star, Keith. I've talked to a few people who know you, and they all say you're an honest and reliable guy who takes your responsibilities seriously. I can't speak for you, but I know that I like you, so I decided to introduce myself to you, be honest, and tell you that I'm interested in you." "Wow, did you just plan the rest of our lives?" he asked in surprise. She smiled. "You really are as smart as they say." And so began my stormy relationship with Sharon Appleby. We seemed like the perfect couple. She refused me nothing, and nothing was forbidden. I never intended to let this girl go. As soon as we became a couple, she drove away all other men, saving herself only for me. I never doubted our relationship for a moment. One Friday night, I decided to surprise her with flowers so she could put them in her dorm before we went to see a movie we both wanted to see. After I knocked on her door, I was shocked to see that the door was opened by a man. "Can I help you with something?" he asked in a defensive tone. Maybe I got the wrong room number. Is Sharon Appleby here?" Sensing the name, Sharon rushed to the door, dressed to go out. "Keith, what are you doing here?" she asked nervously. "I thought we would meet at your place as usual." With an indignant look, I asked, "Who is this guy?" She opened the door wider so I could enter. "I thought that you should meet sooner or later, so it's better to let it be sooner. Keith Carlisle, this is Wesley Stanton, my roommate. Wesley, this is my boyfriend I told you about." "Your roommate?" "Yes, Keith, this is a mixed-type dormitory. Wesley and I are both philosophy majors, and we have very similar opinions, so it seemed natural to live together. I know what you're thinking, and no, it's not what you thought. You're my guy, and I hope it stays that way." Reading my face and sensing my displeasure, Wesley came to her aid. What Sharon tries not to talk about is her attempt to protect my privacy, and I love her for it. She's a good soul, but you already know that. I prefer men. Sharon respects and actively advocates for my uniqueness. That's why she probably didn't mention me earlier. Since I myself revealed myself to you, this relieves her of responsibility. I think if she treats you the way she says, you must be a good guy too. That's it, Keith, my dirty little secret. He was wearing sports shorts and a t-shirt. Of course, he was in his own room, so he had no reason to get dressed. I looked around the room and saw several posters of old people, some in tunics. Wesley noticed me looking at them and intervened. Sharon and I discussed a lot about the structure of influential philosophers of all time. We immediately agreed on 5 of them, but argued that we were right on the other 5 until we finally came to an agreement and came up with a list of the top 10. The posters you see here depict Aristotle, Plato, Friedrich Nietzsche, René Descartes, Confucius, Socrates, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Locke, Jean-Paul Sartre, and David Hume. Sharon and I spend a lot of time discussing what we both like about philosophy and applying those principles to our daily lives. She's as deep into it as I am, but we both also have an interest in art. After the shock began to wear off, Sharon finally spoke. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about this sooner, Keith, but it wasn't my secret to reveal. I couldn't do that to a good friend. Are these flowers for me? They are wonderful, thank you. Wesley, could you put them in the water for me, please? Keith and I have a date, and I don't want to waste another minute. She did her best to calm me down. While we were walking, she took my hand and asked, Are you okay, Keith? Doesn't it bother you that my roommate is a man? Wesley listens to me talk about you all the time and knows how crazy I am about you. I love you, Keith, and I don't want anything to come between us, especially my neighbor. Just say so, and I'll ask for another roommate or move into another room with a girl, although I would be sad to lose someone who, before you came into my life, was my best friend and always supported me. I thought about what they both revealed to me, and it seemed to coincide with reality. She suggested changing my roommate to make it more comfortable for me. This spoke volumes in her favor. The fact that she defended Wesley's peculiarity also impressed me as correct. Having thought it all over, I saw no reason to doubt or worry about our relationship. She made it clear that she was with me. I decided to pull myself together and try to be as good a person as she thought she was. This is not necessary, dear. I have no problem with Wesley being your roommate. It just came as a shock to me, that's all. I wouldn't want you to hold a grudge against me for separating you from a good platonic philosophical friend. I have friends with whom I regularly discuss rocket science, and I don't think twice about the fact that they are women. We're just like-minded science nerds. I understand. But thanks for the offer. This means a lot to me. After that introduction, Sharon rarely mentioned Wesley unless I asked. Sometimes I saw them together on campus, going to the same lecture, but I never thought about it. I also noticed Wesley walking with other guys, which seemed to confirm everything I had been told about both of them. Sharon was always practical and matter-of-fact in every decision she made. I believe that her philosophical enlightenment is deeply woven into the fabric of her personality. She was rarely emotional and always logical. It was annoying at times, but I eventually got used to that part of her character. The next 2 years flew by, and as graduation approached, I proposed to Sharon, and she happily accepted. Her only demand of me was to ask Wesley to be one of my witnesses. I told her that I agreed, provided that she made sure that he did not flirt with my other witnesses. She laughed and promised to talk to him about it, so he would be on his best behavior. We decided to wait until the summer after graduation. I became quite accustomed to Wesley's ubiquitous presence due to his cohabitation and friendship with Sharon, but he and I never became close, having no common interests other than Sharon. Despite Sharon's distractions, I was still a top student when I received my master's degree in aerospace engineering. Sharon and Wesley also received their bachelor's degrees in philosophy with a minor in art. Sharon admitted that Wesley barely passed his graduation exams. She admitted that if it had not been for her considerable assistance in preparing him for the exams, he would have had to repeat another year. I believed his philosophy of life led him to ignore academic standards, or he was simply lazy. I thought he was lazy, but I never expressed my disapproving opinion of him to Sharon. He remained her best friend outside of our marriage. I had no expectations that he would find a good job with a philosophy degree, especially with his terrible grades, but his future was ultimately secured. Sharon admitted to me after our wedding that Wesley always knew this, and also knew that one day he would inherit all of his parents' wealth. This may have explained his lack of motivation to achieve. I met Nate Perkins and Doug Bradley at shows. They both worked for Aerojet Rocketdyne, an L3 Harris Technologies company that makes the engines for NASA's new rocket. They were working on a rocket engine called the RS-25. 4 of these engines are installed at the base of the rocket and will be the first to fire when the rocket lifts off on the Artemis 1 mission to the moon. They were impressed by my infectious enthusiasm for aerospace engineering, as well as my knowledge. After 3 interviews, thanks to their recommendations, I was hired to work at the Aerojet Rocketdyne headquarters in the small town of Rancho Cordova in Sacramento County, California. My starting salary was $175,000 per year with special bonuses based on project results. I joined a team already working on developing engines for use in the upcoming mission to Mars. I've never been more excited about a job prospect. It was my dream. After our wedding and honeymoon, a realtor helped us find the perfect 5-bedroom home for us. I know 5 bedrooms seems like a lot to think about, but we engineers think ahead. I envisioned having 2 or 3 children, which would leave 1 room free for guests or for use as a home office. There was also room for 1 parent to stay while visiting from another part of the country. We were both reluctant to leave our parents, but Sharon's practical, philosophical mind led her to support me 100% in my career choice. I really admire her and appreciate her support. She never once complained about our situation and enthusiastically embraced our new and exciting future in California with me. Sharon's degree in philosophy left her with limited job opportunities in our small town, but with my fairly large salary, she did a good job as a housewife. She kept the house in perfect order, cooked all my favorite meals, and satisfied all my appetites behind closed doors. I was a happy man. Imagine my surprise one evening, about 3 months after our wedding, when I returned home and found Wesley with us. "Hello, dear," she greeted me with a kiss. "Dinner is almost ready." Wesley came over for a visit, and we reminisced a little about old times. "Why don't you go and shower like usual, and then we can talk over dinner?" "Hi, Wesley." I reluctantly extended my hand for a handshake. "I'll be back soon." While I was taking a shower, I wondered what this scoundrel was doing in our house. Hell, if he asks to stay the night, it might interfere with my nightly fun. I quickly dressed in casual clothes and returned to the kitchen. The table was set for 3 and Sharon was delighted. After she filled my plate with all my favorite foods, she began. "Honey, isn't it great to see Wesley again? He just called out of the blue and decided to visit." It was a breath of fresh air to discuss the nuances of philosophy again with someone who was in the know. "I'm not saying you're a bad communicator, honey, but philosophy was never your thing, just like rocket science wasn't mine." "Well, I think it's good that you were able to chat a little. What brings you to our area, Wesley? I don't know if you know, but my philosophy degree turned out to be pretty useless for making a mark in this world." Sharon told me that she hasn't found any suitable work in her field here either. It's true, Rancho Cordova isn't that big of a city, so there aren't many options in her area, but she agreed to try being a housewife, and so far she's loving it. I know for sure that she is happy now. It's true, Keith. She was telling me how happy she was at the moment. I could teach philosophy at university if I went back to study for my master's and doctorate. But to be honest, I just have no desire to go back to school, especially without my best friend. I'm sure you would be interested in teaching if you decided to complete your education. I have never seen anyone as passionate about philosophy as the 2 of you, but having completed my master's, I can attest to how much work and time it takes to make this happen. You're right, Keith. If you remember, we both studied art as a minor. I always considered myself a pretty good artist, while Sharon was more inclined to study art. I was recently exploring opportunities to use my talent in drawing and, as fate would have it, I found a job right here in Rancho Cordova at the Artistic Expressions Studio on Holt Avenue. They specialize in illustrations for children's books and have earned a good reputation among children's book publishers who actively recommend them to authors. When I flew here for my interview consisted of 3 sketches that I drew representing the author's vision in one of the books they were judging. They liked my innovative sketches and offered me a job on the spot, so here I am. Isn't this wonderful, dear? What are the odds that Wesley's best job was right here in Rancho Cordova? As a philosopher, I certainly don't believe in fate, but this is an incredibly lucky coincidence. Yes, what a coincidence, I retorted sarcastically. Ignoring my prick, she added, "Don't you see? Now that Wesley will be living in the same city, we will be able to see each other from time to time so that I can share my philosophical thoughts with someone who understands where I am coming from." Wesley supported her. "It's mutual, Sharon. I've been missing my sparring partner since graduating from university, and no one who hasn't been as immersed in doctrine and principles as you, and I can carry on a conversation on an intellectual level. On the one hand, I would welcome the opportunity to visit you from time to time, if Keith doesn't mind. I will never do anything that could cause problems. Plus, given the number of male-dominated businesses in this city, I think my chances of finding a partner with similar aspirations are quite high. My college connections have already gone their separate ways." Both of them looked at me. I knew I was being manipulated, but Sharon seemed determined to reconnect with her friend for philosophical conversations, which would only make my head more confused in trying to follow them. I wanted to make her happy. "We'll be glad to see you from time to time, Wesley. Just let us know in advance so Sharon can prepare for your arrival." "Thank you, dear, but there is one more thing that Wesley needs now. He flew here for an interview, not knowing how everything would work out, so his return ticket is open. Now that he has a job, he needs a place to live. It may take a couple of days or even a week until he finds a suitable place that fits his budget. Do you mind if he stays with us while he looks for an apartment with a realtor during the day? As soon as he signs the lease for his new apartment, he'll fly back east and get everything ready for his move here." I wasn't thrilled at the idea of Mr. Genderqueer being in our area, but I couldn't think of a compelling reason to object. After all, they had been roommates for almost 4 years. Hell, he slept in the same room as her a lot more than I did. "Of course, you can stay here while you look for an apartment, Wesley. Sharon, why don't you start with the realtor we worked with to find this place? She seemed very knowledgeable about the area and was great at accommodating our needs." "Great idea. Wesley, you'll love meeting Glenda Cook. She is a smart woman and is great at choosing options to suit her needs." Wesley spent 5 nights in our guest room before flying out on the 6th day. As I suspected, Sharon was nervous while we had a guest, so I had to make do without sex. Well, that's okay. 2 weeks later, I was informed that he had successfully moved and settled into his new apartment about 3 miles away. Sharon respectfully asked me every time before inviting him to dinner, which on average happened about 3 times a month. When Sharon announced she was pregnant, I couldn't have been happier. The ultrasound showed that we are having a girl. I attended my first few OB appointments with her, feeling nervous. When the time of delivery approached, the only problem between us was the name. She insisted on naming our daughter Cheryl Diane Carlisle, explaining that she had always loved the name and wanted to give it to our first daughter. I wanted to name her after her mother and mine, but she was completely against it. Since she was doing the bulk of the labor, I was happy to give in to her. It wasn't that important to me what her name would be because I was going to spoil her endlessly. The first time I saw and held my daughter, my heart expanded, ready to love her 1,000 times more. Wesley came to the hospital to celebrate this joyful event. He asked permission to keep it in Sharon's room for a while and asked me to take a photo with his phone, which I agreed to. He noted Cheryl's many similarities to her mother. I was both happy and relieved that this was the case. I told them that if she was like me, she might have a hard time finding a boyfriend. Sharon's mother stayed with her for the first week after leaving the hospital, and my mother spent the next week with her. If they had stayed longer, I wouldn't have had the chance to spoil Cheryl. They would do it themselves. This child was loved beyond measure. Our first Christmas with a baby was a celebratory occasion. Since we still had 2 spare bedrooms after Cheryl arrived, both of our parents gave up Thanksgiving, flew over, and spent Christmas with us. As expected, they showered the unsuspecting 4-month-old with gifts of all sizes and types. Of course, I couldn't give in by spending less than her grandparents. I went crazy and spent over $600 on gifts that Cheryl won't even remember. I did not care. We had so much fun celebrating the holiday with her. After they all flew home, Wesley asked permission to visit us the day after they left. Sharon recovered well from Cheryl's birth, so we said it was normal. He came in, laughed with Sharon at a few philosophical jokes that I couldn't understand, and turned his attention to Cheryl. He gave her a t-shirt with a slogan on it, which Sharon quickly put on her. The t-shirt read, "It doesn't matter how slow you go as long as you don't stop." Confucius. He played with Cheryl for about 30 minutes. Sharon took a few pictures and sent them to his phone. Wesley thanked me very much for allowing this short visit and left another late Christmas present for Cheryl, saying that he had always kept it, but did not want to interfere with our family gathering during the holidays. I felt differently about Wesley after that and respected him more. He quietly left Cheryl an unopened gift. Some time after he left, I asked, "What do you think this could be?" "I have no idea, Keith. When Wesley and I talked earlier, he told me that he sent the photo you took of him holding Cheryl in the hospital when she was born to his parents. I've met them a few times when they visited him at college, so they know me as his best friend. He said they loved the photo and wanted to give Cheryl a Christmas present. He said his parents were unhappy with his lifestyle because even if he eventually married a man and they adopted a child, the chances of having grandchildren as a result of his normal relationship where their blood would be passed on were zero. So they came to love our little Cheryl as a kind of replacement grandchild." Interesting. So the t-shirt is from him, and the wrapped gift is from his parents. So I understand. "Since you are his friend and you know his parents, you should open it," I said curiously. Sharon smiled and carefully unwrapped the gift. Opening it, she began to take out sets of coins tied together from the United States Mint. This was a collection of all the coins produced by the Mint for the calendar year of Cheryl's birth. In addition to the regular and commemorative coins, there were all silver and gold sets marked by each of the 3 U.S. mints. There were even platinum and palladium coins. I was amazed. I started looking up the value of this collection scattered on the floor in front of Cheryl, who was more interested in the cardboard box. The collection was easily worth over $20,000. What the hell? I reported my findings to Sharon. "What do you want to do with it?" she asked uncertainty. "How can we leave a gift to our 4-month daughter who is worth more than $20,000? Wouldn't that be wrong?" "It depends on how you look at it," she suggested. "What do you mean? I've never even met these people, and they give Cheryl a gift of this magnitude. What will they expect in return if we accept it? And where do these people even live? You don't understand, Keith. They are rich, incredibly rich, filthy rich. For us, ordinary people, such a gift seems extravagant and pretentious. For Wesley's billionaire parents, it's like giving her a nice stroller or car seat. They don't think about their gestures at all. If we try to get him back, it would offend them terribly, and it could also damage our friendship with Wesley, and I don't want to risk that." The Stantons' main residence is in Dallas, Texas, but in addition to many other properties, they also have a huge mansion in Sacramento. Wesley gave Cheryl a cute philosophy t-shirt, probably because it was all he could afford. He probably knew what his parents were giving her and didn't want it revealed in front of him so as not to embarrass him, but he didn't want Cheryl to be deprived of something really good. Couldn't we just write them a nice thank you note and leave it for her to use when she's older? After a few seconds of reflection, I realized that her words sounded reasonable given the circumstances. I never thought about the unimaginable wealth they must have owned. If I were a billionaire, I could perform such a gesture of kindness simply because I am a good person. If I could be that kind, why shouldn't I be? Besides, they didn't give anything to Sharon or me. This was exclusively for Cheryl. Since it was Christmas, I decided I could live with it and told her so. But she mentioned something else that intrigued me. Why did you say that the t-shirt Wesley gave her was probably all he could afford? Don't artists make a lot of money? She laughed at my naivety. Yes, famous artists who were able to gain great popularity really receive large sums for each of their works, just like good portrait and landscape painters. But Wesley, he works as part of a team of children's book illustrators and is not a solo artist. He once mentioned to me that his salary was about $45,000 a year. Here in California, his rent and other expenses easily eat up more than three-quarters of that amount. He doesn't quite live paycheck to paycheck, but almost. Please don't tell him about his modest income. It would put him in an awkward position, and I wouldn't want that as his friend. I didn't know Wesley was a poor artist. There were many less expensive places than California where he could have settled, but apparently he wanted to be near his parents, who had a mansion nearby in Sacramento. I felt that my relationship with Sharon was strong and continuing to strengthen. She was the perfect wife and mother and adored Cheryl as a loving mother should. We settled into a routine for sex. To rephrase that, we had sex on a schedule, but it was never a routine. When Cheryl entered the toddler stage and began to walk, or rather shuffle, it became obvious to everyone around her that she was a daddy's girl. Every time I returned home from work, she would scream and shuffle towards me with open arms and cover my face with wet kisses. God, how I loved this girl. Sharon seemed puzzled by how attached Cheryl was to me. After all, they spent the whole day together, and I was only home in the evenings and on weekends. Perhaps it really is absence that breeds tenderness. Sharon almost accused me once of trying to poison Cheryl against her, but she couldn't give a single supporting example. Although I couldn't explain Cheryl's affection for me, I admit that I secretly loved it. Wesley's parents, maintaining their affection for Cheryl, continued to give her special, expensive gifts on her birthdays and Christmas. Wesley continued to send them updated photos after each visit. I reminded myself that Cheryl had always been a long-term beneficiary, and I didn't want to deprive her of that. Sharon asked me if I would mind if Wesley's parents became Cheryl's godparents, given their generous affection, which they generously supported financially. I finally gave in after persisting enough. Sharon, I have a question out of curiosity about Wesley. Of course, dear, what do you want to know? Well, you talk a lot, either when he's visiting here or regularly on the phone. How are things going in his personal life? Oh, we really discuss a lot, and this topic also comes up sometimes. He told me that while he admits to having an active personal life, he has never met another man who has ever met the standards he has accepted as the minimum requirements for the man he will one day marry. Please tell me what kind of man he is looking for that meets his minimum requirements. I was shocked to hear her answer. He's looking for a man just like you, Keith. He views you as a man and respects the hell out of the way you treat me and take care of your family. Although he has gone through many courageous, promising candidates, he stated that none of them compares to you. Please don't tell him that I told you this, but he told me many times that if you weren't already married to me, he would immediately pursue you with everything. He even once told me that the reason he loves our wonderful children dearly is because they came from you. She smiled widely, as if I had just been given a high compliment. To tell the truth, such thoughts disgusted me. I like women. I hope you let him know that, Sharon. Of course, she grinned, but it tickles me that he's so in love with you. I told him I would never share with you, so he'll just have to look elsewhere. She chuckled again. That's when I decided to pay more attention to how Wesley acted around me. I didn't want to give him any idea that I might be interested in any kind of mutual arrangement. Just before Cheryl's second birthday, Sharon gave birth to our twins, a boy and a girl. Although they were not identical twins, they shared some similarities. I wanted to name the boy after myself. She rejected the idea from the start. She reminded me that Wesley was Wesley Stanton IV and told me how much he hated it. He doesn't hate his parents. He just wishes he had a name independent of his father, but he had no choice in the matter, so he would lose his inheritance. So he's trapped. I don't want that for our boy. I feel sorry for Wesley if this is true, but I always wanted my son, if I ever had one, to bear my name. But he'll be Carlisle, isn't that enough? I like my name, and I believe that our son will like it too. I'm not going to give in like I did with Cheryl. I really insist that my boy bear my name. You have to let me do this, Sharon. She seemed to be weighing several options before offering what she considered a compromise. I'll offer you a deal. If you allow me to choose a name for the girl, then I will agree to have Keith in his name if I can choose another name, Conrad. I've always liked this name. How about Conrad Keith Carlisle and Jocelyn Edwina Carlisle? Do we have an agreement? I didn't want to start a world war because of this, and I admit that the name Jocelyn I also liked for our new daughter, so I agreed. We both signed the birth certificates, and it was settled. Little did I know it was a hollow victory. She always called him Conrad, although I called him Keith. However, she spent all day with him, and I had much less time in his life. He never responded to the name Keith, but always turned around when his name was Conrad. Well, Cheryl kept running to me every time I came home. Now she called me Dada, which melted my heart. Luckily, her kisses became more discreet, and she no longer painted my face like a paintbrush when she kissed me. But she kissed me anyway. God, how I loved this girl. Conrad and Jocelyn had their hands full and kept Sharon busier than usual in the early years of their lives. I didn't think about the Stantons for long. Since Wesley had not yet found a worthy marriage partner, let alone the possibility of adopting a child, they asked to become godparents for the newborn twins. Who am I to deny my children such expensive gifts for birthdays and Christmas? Sharon continued to be a dynamo in bed. Our sex life never became dull. She remained very disciplined on our Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, but who am I to complain? When all three children went to school, she stepped up her efforts even more in the bedroom. She told me she has more energy now after taking a break from parenting at school. I was a happy man. When the twins were 6 years old and Cheryl was 8 years old, we had a special project at work that required a lot of my time since I was chosen to be the project manager. We tried to develop a synthesis of a solid fuel chemical engine with an electric one for propulsion. Such an engine would have enough energy to reach orbit, but would also be able to travel long distances afterwards without jettisoning its boosters. We had little time to prove the effectiveness of our development. Unfortunately, this took up most of my weekend. I really hated being away from home, but Sharon said she knew there would be times like this in my line of work, and she loved my dedication to working to support our family. Surprisingly, the Stantons got down to business. We learned that they owned a 120-foot yacht with a captain and crew that they maintained in San Pablo Bay near Vallejo, California. The 70-mile trip takes only about an hour and 15 minutes. During the summer, when I worked weekends, Sharon and the children, with my blessing, accepted their invitation to spend every weekend on their yacht. This gave the Stantons a chance to spend time with their godchildren, and the kids had a great time. Of course, I didn't like that I couldn't be with them on the weekends, but their absence allowed me to work late into the night and fall into bed as soon as I got home. During the week, I tried to be home by 9 p.m. I saw the children briefly before they were sent to bed. Cheryl, bless her heart, always refused to go to bed without seeing and kissing Daddy first. God, I loved this girl. Later, I asked Sharon why the children called the Stantons Grandma and Grandpa when they talked about them and the unforgettable trips they took with them on their giant boat. Sharon explained that it was an honorary title that the children decided to give themselves because of the frequent interactions with them on trips and the wonderful gifts they were all given on their birthdays and Christmas. Besides, they were their godparents, and she didn't have the heart to hurt the Stantons' feelings by correcting the children in front of them. One thing I will say about Sharon and my long hours was that no matter what time I finally came home, she always took care of my sexual needs. In fact, I came to appreciate the Stantons more and more for their role in the lives of their godchildren. For example, every year for 2 weeks I had to lead our representation at various week-long exhibitions. While I could take Sharon and the kids with me, they would be bored to tears waiting for me to be available to them late at night. Whenever possible, the Stantons would take it upon themselves to fly them all to an exotic location for a week, where they would have a wonderful time. Sacramento Mather Airport was only 4 miles from our city, and there was a private jet hovering there. Grandma and Grandpa Stanton were very popular names in our family. In subsequent years, more such opportunities appeared. When I was assigned to a 2-week design program at one of our locations in Europe, Grandma and Grandpa Stanton took them all on a 2-week Disney cruise. When they returned, they told exciting stories about the excursions they had all taken and the magnificent performances they had all seen. I, for one, appreciated their active participation. One strange thing worth mentioning is that although I briefly met Stanton when they took my family out for a ride in their limousine, they politely declined all invitations to dinner and family outings at our house. I don't know if they felt that staying in our humble home was beneath their dignity compared to their mansion, staffed by hired workers. Whether it was true or not, I never heard a single disparaging word in either direction. When the children were in junior and senior high school, Conrad and Jocelyn appreciated their mom's help with homework and projects. But Cheryl, bless her little heart, insisted on waiting for Dad to help her no matter what time I got home from work. I never presented a minute spent helping her. Besides the fantastic sex with my wife, the highlight of my day was spending time with Cheryl. Sharon became very upset with her, saying that she was causing Dad unnecessary stress by insisting that I help her. She demanded that I talk some sense into Cheryl and make her work on these things with her mother. Although I said I would talk to her, I quietly told Cheryl that I enjoyed working with her and not worrying about burdening myself. After all, that's what dads are for, I told her. It was my privilege. The children grew like weeds. I was as happy with my family as any man had a right to be. I was proud of all 3 children, but I was always especially close to Cheryl, much to Sharon's chagrin. She stated that she had invested much more time into her than I had, but her connection with her was illusory compared to her obvious attachment to her father. My vanity led me to attribute it to my genetics, but Sharon also insisted on the same thing. For some reason, Cheryl was smart as a whip and skipped the class due to her precocious intelligence. During her senior year of high school, when she was just 17, Cheryl asked me to help her pick out a prom dress, which made me very excited. I bought my daughter an elegant, but at the same time daring dress that amazed every man who saw her in it. As part of my role, I read the riot act to her date, but she prepared it for my speech. I was annoyed that Wesley wanted to take a picture with her before she left for prom, but I kept quiet for Sharon's sake. She was still friends with him after all these years. I don't know if his whole story was new to her or if she pitied him in his unmarried state. She reminded me that he still admires me greatly and that all of his potential suitors still pale in comparison. The thought still disgusted me. 2 days after graduation, Cheryl came to see me. Dad, I don't know if Mom told you, but the Stantons have offered to pay all my expenses if I agree to go to Georgia Tech and get a bachelor's degree in philosophy, just like Mom and Wesley did all those years ago. No, honey, she didn't tell me. I had no idea. Well, my mother persistently pressured me to agree, saying that it would help our family financially if I accepted such a gift from them in the form of education. But to be completely honest, I'm just not as interested in philosophy as my mother. She quickly loses patience with me every time I reject the idea. I do not know what to do. I don't want to be a burden to the family financially, but I don't want to end up with a useless degree. My mom tells me that it doesn't matter what degree I get because just like her, I won't anyway use it when I get married. What do you think I should do, Daddy? I was shocked by this discovery. I knew Sharon was into philosophy, but I had no idea that she would try to force her ideals on any of our children any more than I would. I made a mental note to talk to Sharon about this topic in the future. Honey, I have no idea what your mother is talking about. Either way, she is completely wrong about our financial situation. Stanton is not the responsibility or place to pay for your college education. This privilege belongs to me. For years, I have put money into investment accounts so that all three of you could go to the college of your choice and achieve your heart's desire. Of course, you're only 17 now, but I can't be proud because you are about to graduate from school. The accounts are full, honey. You just need to let me know what major you want to pursue your degree in and where you were accepted, and I'll immediately transfer the money for all 4 years in one fell swoop. She tearfully hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. Thanks, Dad. I just knew you would never let me down. I didn't tell Mom or anyone else about it because I didn't want to argue with her about it. I want to get a degree from Georgia Tech, just like you. I love you, Dad, and I want to do what you do, not what someone else wants me to do. I have an acceptance letter from Georgia Tech. Let me do it. She was fiddling with her phone. Okay, Dad, I just sent you the link and password to my Georgia Tech online account. Once my bill is paid in full, I will let everyone know about my decision. My phone rang, acknowledging receipt of the notification. Darling, give me 15 minutes to make the necessary translations. I'll pay for all 4 years now of your training to seal the deal. I couldn't be prouder of you if you became President of the United States. God, I love this girl so much. She's now fully secured for the next 4 years. I hope she achieves her dreams just like I did. Did you actually prepay Cheryl's expenses for her 4 years of engineering at Georgia Tech? My disappointed wife asked. Did you really try to force her to get a degree in philosophy, which she had no interest in? Her grandparents generously offered to pay all of her expenses for her philosophy degree. Her refusal would have offended them and damaged their relationship. I was simply trying to do what was right for all parties. Correction, her grandparents didn't offer to pay a penny for her education. Now her godparents could offer, but not her grandparents. Okay, Mr. Durgell Engineer. They all call them their grandparents. I was simply acknowledging their status in the eyes of our children. But why did you talk her out of a philosophy degree without consulting me first? It was extremely rude of you to do that. Behind my back. You mean how you went behind my back, trying to force her to study philosophy without telling me a word about it? Is this the kind of rudeness you're talking about, honey? There's no need to get so annoyed, Keith. I'll talk to Wesley about him, and I am trying to reimburse you for the amount you contributed to Cheryl's college. His parents wanted to pay for her education and hoped that their generous offer would encourage her to follow the same path as Wesley and me. Again, this is something you should have talked to me about first. I understand that for you, the Stantons are immortal gods who must rule the universe with their all-consuming power. While I appreciate the kind gestures they have made for you and the children over the years, it is not their place to provide for my daughter's education. This responsibility lies on my shoulders as the breadwinner of our family. I paid for her education because that's what fathers do with their children. When Conrad and Jocelyn are ready for college, I will do the same with them. This is what Cheryl wants, and I'm going to make sure she has what she wants. Sharon shook her head as if I was as clueless as a polar bear. I did not have her pedigree philosophical immersion and understanding. For her, it was just a practical matter without involving emotions. The Stantons have more money than us, so we should let them pay for whatever they want to pay for. I'm just not wired that way. She left in frustration, recognizing my limited ability to understand. Of course, she always believed that she was coming from a higher position of understanding. In this case, I'm glad she thinks I'm a Neanderthal. The following week, we were all present at Cheryl's graduation. Many photographs were taken from Stantons, Wesley, and our entire family. Sharon's parents and my parents flew out for the event, and we were all thrilled for her, especially since she graduated with honors a year ahead of her classmates. After I had already paid for her upcoming tuition fees for her engineering degree, her mother and I also gave Cheryl the best, most reliable laptop anyone could buy, as well as a couple of expensive, specialized scientific calculators that I knew she would need for her engineering classes. Cheryl hugged my neck tightly and kissed my cheek, whispering in my ear, "Thank you. I love you forever, Dad, forever." You are the best dad in the whole world. Don't forget that. God, how I loved this girl. Wesley gave Cheryl a new copy of his favorite book about the most important philosophers of all time. Sharon cried as she leafed through it. Cheryl thanked him politely and put the book aside. Our parents gave her clothes and jewelry that she adored. As usual, the Stantons made a show of presenting her with a brand new Audi R8 GT with a full package of options. A quick internet search showed that it cost them over $250,000. How could she not be happy? She almost jumped for joy. But I was happy for my daughter. She didn't leave my side all day, except when she drove the Audi. She begged me to go with her, but I politely refused and said that she should take the twins with her. They happily agreed. Much to the disappointment of Sharon and the Stantons, I showed no interest in the car or made any comments about it. It was still Cheryl's day. A few weeks later, on Thursday, June 27th, something unusual happened when I returned home from work, expecting Cheryl to make my day with her energetic greeting. Why is it so quiet in the house? Where are the children? Wesley took them away about an hour ago. He was taking them to the marina for the night on the Stantons' yacht. They seemed very happy, as they had not been on the water on this luxury yacht for a long time. Okay, but don't you usually go with them when they meet like this, Stantons? Usually, yes, but not today. I want this evening to be the most special night of your life, even better than our honeymoon, and I thought it would be great to be able to let it go without the kids underfoot. I smiled widely at her offer. To what do I owe this special favor of my entire life? I asked, knitting my eyebrows. Recently, I was thinking about our life together. I realized that you were an exemplary provider for me and my children. I am very lucky to have chosen you, my dear, and I thought it would be only fitting to show you how much I appreciate you for pleasing you and knowing that you are hungry for reward. Eat all this wonderful food that I prepared for you, my dear, consisting of all your favorite dishes. Some energy you can muster by the time I'm done with you tonight. She didn't have to tell me twice. I have no idea what accelerated my luck, but I wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. My olfactory senses were overloaded with the delicious delicacies she had prepared for me. I have never eaten more delicious food in my life. I took a quick shower while she cleaned up the kitchen in preparation for the main event, and what an event it was. When the alarm went off the next morning, I jumped out of bed, realizing that I had already hit the snooze button several times. Sharon was already up, so I pulled on my clothes and hurried to the kitchen for a goodbye kiss, hoping I wouldn't be late for work. All I found was a note on the table that she left for me, saying that she had gone to check on the kids and that I would see her tonight. I barely made it on time to the meeting I had made. At noon, while I was at work, I received a short message from Sharon. I have a special request. Please come home on time after work tonight. It is important. I responded asking if I could expect a repeat of last night, but she didn't respond. I had a lot of work to keep me busy, but I was thinking fervently about what treats might be in store. We never had sex on Fridays ever. Maybe she decided to change her ingrained habits this time. I found it odd to see a stretch limousine parked out front when I arrived home at the appointed time as she requested. I had no idea the Stantons would be here. I quickly remembered whose birthday it was, but it wasn't. They usually came to give the kids special expensive things for birthdays and Christmas, so this was something different. When I entered the house, I was greeted by an uneasy silence. Usually one of the children was always running around the house. Seeing no one, I was about to call when Sharon spoke. In the kitchen, Keith. She and Wesley sat across the table from me. I noticed a limousine at the entrance, Sharon. What's happening? Please sit down, Keith. We have a very serious matter to discuss. We? So you and Wesley. Right. You always knew that I'm very pragmatic, so I'll just tell it like it is. I'm going to divorce you, Keith, as soon as possible, and Wesley and I will get married the same day our divorce is approved by the court. I need to make it clear to you that this breakup will be final not only for me, but also for the children. There is absolutely no chance that we will ever reconcile as husband and wife after our separation. There is no hope, Keith, no hope. What? I thought you loved me. Is this some kind of sick joke? Today is not the 1st of April. Why? I was shocked. Over the years, I've gotten used to you, Keith, like an old sweater that keeps you warm when it's cold. But Wesley was, is, and will be my only everlasting love. He and I are inseparable souls that were always meant to be together. I will not bore you with quotations from the philosophers to whom Wesley and I are devoted. I seriously doubt that you will ever be able to understand how inextricably linked he and I are. But you said that he loves men. When did it start? He pretended so that you could calmly accept his presence in my life and the lives of his children. We never ended our relationship. When he was my college roommate, we were intimate every night, and our physical, emotional, and intellectual relationship has never stopped since the day we first met. Wesley and I made love every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon while you were at work, and on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday I stayed with you as your reward for your maintenance. On Sunday I rested. Out of respect for both of you, I have never given either of you recycled items since I have never been with both of you on the same day. But during all those vacations and holidays with Wesley and his parents, he and I stayed in the same room while they looked after the kids. His parents knew what was going on from the very beginning. Being apart was unbearable for both of us, which we are fixing today. I don't understand. If Mr. Wonderful here is your soulmate, why did you even marry me and have children with me? It does not make sense. I can answer that, Keith, Wesley began. Shut up. I don't want to hear a word from your mouth, I screamed. This is between me and Sharon. At my cry, two strong men ran into the kitchen, ready to grab me to protect Wesley. He waved his hand at them. As expected, Keith is emotionally shaken. Perhaps it would be better if you did all the talking, Wesley suggested to my wife. Of course, expensive. He does not have our enlightenment. Keith, Wesley, and I are truly husband and wife. We are forever united in the universe in a special spiritual ceremony in the first year of our union. The only problem we needed to solve was our financial issues. As you know, our philosophy degrees don't always lead to high-paying jobs. Wesley instinctively knew that we would need significant financial resources to start and raise our family. His wealthy parents, unfortunately, decided not to provide him with their extensive financial resources until Wesley inherited their fortune upon their death. He had no choice but to accept their decision, knowing that temporary measures would be required for now. Ever since he proposed this plan with you, we've been playing the long game. He allowed me to share myself with you as a simple worker bee in the garden. Wesley personally selected and approved you to be my temporary husband to provide for me and his children until he became secure through inheritance. Your profession pays well, that's why he chose you. Remember, Keith, I came to you myself, caught you, legally married you, and allowed you to provide and share my life and the lives of my children. You mean our children? She quietly opened the folder in front of her, pulled out 3 sheets of paper, and pushed them towards me. No, Keith, none of the children are yours. Not even your precious Cheryl. Wesley knew you'd want proof. These are certified DNA reports legally confirming that all 3 children are the biological offspring of Wesley Stanton Roman IV and myself. I had to carefully plan and time my fertile periods to make sure none of them were yours. Of course, we needed you to believe that they were yours so that you could provide for them in the best possible way. You have done a good job as a temporary husband and father, and for that we thank you for your services. And just so you know, Jocelyn was named after Wesley's 2 grandmothers, and Conrad was his grandfather's middle name. They Stanton through and through. She mercilessly tore my heart apart in the most brutal way possible, speaking as calmly as if she were discussing a manicure. Her shamelessness was incomprehensible. I looked at the documents she offered. They confirmed her words. I hung my head in defeat. My life was a lie. I didn't know whether to try to kill them or kill myself. My feelings were a complete mess. I took a deep breath as my engineering mind took over. I had to look at my life dispassionately and calmly, so as not to give them the pleasure of seeing me slowly collapsing. I wanted them to think that I had nothing to worry about anymore. My silence spurred her on. Is there something you want to say, Keith? Don't you want to yell at me or call me horrible names? Miss Appleby, I replied calmly, deliberately using her maiden name as a way of disowning her. If you do not have the intellectual capacity to understand who you are without my explanation, then the effort will be in vain. You exalt the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza. She was stunned by my attack, but quickly regained her composure. So be it. Morality is just an abstraction. Archaic terms such as traitor, cuckold, and betrayal are all subjective and dependent on the perspective of the observer. And the spoon ran away with the fork, I interjected. I have always loved fairy tales. Thanks for reminding me of this. Enough of your childish nonsense, Miss Appleby. Why now? What event brought your rottenness to light? Again she took exception to my dismissive tone, but was determined to maintain her version of politeness. Sadly, Wesley's parents died in a plane crash on Monday. Fortunately, we were told that they died instantly and did not suffer. We were busy preparing the funeral, so we didn't have a chance to tell you until today. Wesley's parents owned 57% of the shares of the pharmaceutical company Clinard Pharmaceuticals, which is worth $450 million with annual income of $125 million. An extraordinary meeting of the board of directors recognized Wesley as their heir, and he inherited their entire fortune. His new financial situation has taken him to a new level, allowing him to take his rightful place at the head of our family, which he does today. She continued, Wesley has decided to move with our reunited family to the Stanton mansion in Dallas for a while. The children and I will go there for the funeral service. Of course, you are neither invited nor welcome. I don't want us to be enemies, Keith. You played your role honestly. We don't demand anything from you in a divorce, absolutely nothing, not even our underwear. Wesley bought new clothes for the kids and me that we are now wearing. Neither of us will take a single thing with us that you have provided. Now that Wesley is fully capable of taking his rightful place as a husband and father in our lives. The house, cars, and everything you bought is still there, along with these quitclaim forms that transfer all ownership exclusively to you. The only personal items we will take with us will be gifts from Wesley and his parents. These are our real treasures. She added, there is only one technical issue left that we would like to resolve before we go. Now that you know the children are not your biological offspring, we have these forms that you must sign to terminate your legal parental rights so that Wesley can legally adopt them and give them their legal name. Legal name. Why does he need to adopt his biological children? Well, we considered leaving your name off their birth certificates, but we realized that it might jeopardize our goal of your continued support of the children. Wesley reluctantly agreed to let you sign their birth certificates, making you their legal father, regardless of their genetic connection to him. In fact, you have always been only a stepfather to them. Now that we are opening a new chapter in their lives, it is time to retire your temporary name in favor of their true legacy, Stanton. Wesley wants to compensate you for your expenses for his children so far. The average estimated cost of raising a child under 18 is about $300,000. Cheryl is only 17, and the twins are both 15. Although that's 7 years of expenses that you haven't yet paid for his children, he wants to reimburse you the full $300K for each child, for a total of $900K. I agree with him that this is more than fair. Additionally, we discovered that you recently deposited $250,000 into Cheryl's college account to cover her 4 years of tuition. Here's a check for the full $1,150,000, a nice neat sum. If you sign these 3 forms terminating your legal parental rights, Thenate, standing over there, assure your signature and have it notarized. How convenient and rational for you to ask me to sell you my interests in the children that you and I raised from birth. With these words, I took the check, examined it, and tore it into pieces. Thank you, Keith. This is unexpected, Sharon exclaimed. Does this mean you will terminate your legal parental rights without compensation? That means, Mrs. Appleby, that I won't sign anything. Do the children know what you are asking me to do? Of course they know. A year ago, when Cheryl turned 16, We told her and the twins that Wesley was their biological father and his parents were their real purebred grandparents. We asked them not to reveal this to you out of respect for how kind a father you have been to them and for maintaining family stability. Naturally, they were shocked at first, but then delighted to realize what their real father's wealth would ultimately bring. I thought to myself, and the hits just keep coming. After Cheryl became a daddy's girl, I believe Sharon deliberately alienated the twins from me, but Cheryl, it hurts. It hurt far more than anything Sharon could ever say or do to me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I do not trust you. After all the lies you've already admitted to, I'll never believe a word you say. I want to hear them tell me they want me to lose my parental rights so this thing can adopt them. Wesley nodded to Nate, who left the room and returned with 3 unusually quiet children. They were wearing new clothes that I had never seen them wear before, just as Sharon had pointed out. When they saw me, they began to sob, everyone except Cheryl. Tears poured from her eyes onto the ground in silent agony. Keith wants to make sure that each of you wants him to terminate his parental rights so that your real biological father can legally adopt you and proudly tell you his name. Do you all agree that this is what you want? All 3 looked at the floor and nodded slowly in agreement. I thought I'd have to check my pulse to make sure my heart was still beating. There are no words to describe the complete devastation I felt at that moment. I decided it was time to let out the anger that had arisen. Okay, Wesley, do you want to play ball? Then let's play catch. Just a few minutes ago, you offered to buy my share in these 3 children, but your offer did not interest me. Now that we are all here together, I will sign your divorce agreement and terminate my parental rights under 2 conditions. Wesley quipped, "Don't be ridiculous. No one is asking you to sell anyone or anything. I was simply offering to reimburse the expenses you have advanced for their care so far." It's a lie and everyone here knows it. I have 3 birth certificates stating that I am their legal and biological father. You are asking me to transfer my rights to you and are ready to pay me money for it. This is a direct offer to buy and sell. I have something for sale and you want to buy it. We agree on a price, that's all. The children looked very dissatisfied by my speech, as if they were being treated as chattel. Since everything that was revealed today revolved around money and its sudden influx, I wanted them to understand that they were being deliberately bought and sold. It wouldn't change the outcome, but it would ease my conscience by pointing it out. Let's get this over with, Keith. That's Mr. Carlyle for you, Mr. Stanton. Okay, Mr. Paz Carlyle, how much money would it take for you to do everything possible for these innocent children? $3 million, $1 million apiece. I'll even add Sharon for free as a bonus. Sharon seemed irritated by my remark, but held her tongue. You have to have a very high opinion of yourself to believe that 3 million is a reasonable number. You think so, right? Okay, no problem. We're done here because these 3 precious children you 2 heroically convinced to disown me as their father are worth far more to me than a measly 3 million. Just wondering, Mr. Stanton, why aren't they worth 3 million to you? He looked nervously at Sharon, then at the kids, and then back at me. After a thoughtful moment, he said, "Done. $325 million, including reimbursement for Cheryl's college expenses." No, not even 3 million, not a penny more. You are buying children, not my funds for Cheryl's college expenses. She may deny that I am her father, but every day she is on campus, she will know that I, Keith Carlyle, the man who loved and raised her, provided for her college, no matter how much money you have at your disposal. Great, he spat. Nate, give this man a check. I'm afraid I'll have to decline the check, since you and Miss Appleby have proven to me that you are both blatant liars. I refuse to sign anything until I receive payment in full. I pulled out my phone and opened my savings account. Here is my bank account, open for your information. Once I see that the balance has increased by 3 million, I will follow through and complete our transaction. Frustrated by my intransigence, Wesley nodded to Nate. He looked at my phone, copied my account number to his phone and initiated the transfer. It took 5 minutes after Wesley entered his password. Check your account now, Mr. Carlisle. I think you will find that the entire amount has been transferred. I confirmed the translation and nodded my head. Now, Mr. Bessie Carlisle, it is time to sign all the requested documents. Not so fast, Mr. Stanton. In case you forgot, I said earlier that I had 2 conditions. So far, only one of them has been completed. You are trying my patience, Mr. Carlisle. Please tell me what other condition you have. One last romp in the hay with Sharon, he bristled. Oh, I already took care of that last night, my love. As you asked, I gave Mr. Carlisle the night of his life, a night he will never forget as long as he lives, she reminded. Isn't that right, Keith? I furrowed my brow in confusion. Are we talking about the same night, last night? I'm confused. If you call your miserable performance last night the night of my life, I feel sorry for poor Mr. Stanton. Why do you think I left you for free? I already forgot about last night. I chuckled. Just as she was about to explode, Wesley grabbed her hand to calm her rage. Let's get this over with, Mr. Carlisle. What is your second condition? Wesley, I want each of the children in turn to look me straight in the eyes and say that they love you more than me and want to leave me from now on and live with you. Sharon jumped to her feet. It's outrageous. I won't allow this. This is cruel to impose on such innocent children. Cruel? Do you mean the same cruelty that you 5 inflicted on me today? How cruel could it be for them to openly admit that they now love and accept him as their only father? Isn't that what just happened to you? Do they agree after you put them here? If I do not hear such confessions, then you will not receive my signatures. I want specific assurances from each of them that this is what they want. Stunned by my words, she returned to her chair. Wesley looked at the children. Conrad looked shyly into my eyes and repeated, Mr. Carlisle, I love Wesley more than you, and from now on I want to be with him. He quickly turned away and wiped his eyes. Your turn, darling. Jocelyn repeated the same words as her brother, barely holding back her tears. Predictably, the twins had little hesitation in their desire to reject me, but my heart was beating in anticipation of Cheryl's reaction. She strangely maintained an angry, albeit tear-stained mask. Cheryl, now it's your turn, honey, Wesley said sternly. Say these words, and all this will end, and we can start our new life. Please say the words, Cheryl. Cheryl looked into my eyes sadly. Her anger increased under the pressure of Wesley's demand, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She wiped her face and said in compromise, Dad, I choose to be with Conrad, Jocelyn, and Mom. I'm sorry, Dad, there are 3 of them, and you are one, she finished with tears. Cheryl, honey, you knew this for over a year and didn't tell me. Why? I had my reasons, Dad. Her crying intensified. Sharon begged me. I thought you loved her. Can't you see that she is confused? Let her go. Damn it, Cheryl. Just say those damn words to him and get it over with, Wesley exclaimed rudely. Cheryl looked at him with hostility in her eyes. Come on, Wesley. Shout at me, call me names, beat me half to death. I will never say these words, she said decisively. By then I was crying myself, forced to force an almost impossible situation on her. My heart wasn't just broken, it was completely destroyed, annihilated. She doesn't need to say any more, I said resignedly. I heard everything. These 2 made you choose between them or me, and you chose them. For reference, I would like to share with you. My tears fell onto the pages as I signed each one. Nate quickly grabbed them and certified my signature, turning them into official documents. Wesley said dryly, Phones. 4 phones were neatly laid out side by side on the table. Mr. Carlisle, he chuckled, this is a legal order requiring you to stay away from me and my family. You may not come within 500 feet of us or communicate with us in any way for the rest of your life. If you violate it, you will end up in jail for contempt of court. We have all new phones and my kids are leaving their old lives behind completely. I demand that you respect this." I took the court order in my hands, tore it into pieces, and replied, "It was unnecessary. It will never be needed. I hope to never see you again." I lied in agony. "Now, if you don't mind, please leave my house." Wesley was the last to say, "I'm sorry, to say the least. You're a good guy. That's why I chose you. Good luck." Once again upset, I replied, "Don't quit your day job to write condolences." My former family members quietly walked out one by one. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Cheryl began to sob loudly as she walked, looking back at me. As she walked out the front door, she shouted, "I'm sorry. I love you, Dad. I will see you again." She was quickly taken away from the house and placed in a limousine. I lost control and fell to the floor, curled up in a ball, sobbing as the threads of my life unraveled. At that moment, I didn't care whether I lived or died. I was flushed down the toilet like a piece of crap, with all four members of my family yanking on the chain. I have been a gullible fool since the day I met Sharon and was caught in their treacherous web of deceit. These two were the most evil and narcissistic people I have ever met. It felt like a tsunami had crashed over me, causing me to drown where I couldn't breathe. I felt the pangs of loss, mourning the loss of my entire family as if they had all suddenly died. After what seemed like hours, I looked at my watch and it was only 30 minutes. I've always stuck to the old adage, you can be part of the problem or part of the solution. I would not advise anyone to experience extreme sadness. I decided that it was better to somehow work through it and become part of the solution rather than be swallowed up in the mire of endless shock and sadness over my circumstances and become part of the problem. I flipped the mental switch that disconnected me from my hopeless emotions and put on my engineering hat to consider how to structure this traumatic event without succumbing to the ongoing pain. I have no wife, children, and no obligations. I am a free man facing an uncertain future. Gloria Gaynor's song, "I Will Survive," immediately came to mind. Wesley and Sharon now have unlimited financial resources, and with it, unlimited dominance. One snap of their fingers is enough to fulfill any of their wishes. Even with my recently contributed $3 million, I'm as poor as a church mouse compared to them. I jotted down some notes to help me focus on my next steps so I could move forward instead of standing still. Suddenly, I realized that I was hungry. This was a good sign for me. I rummaged through the refrigerator and pulled out the leftovers of my favorite meal that Sharon had prepared for me last night. After all, why throw away good food? After cleaning up after myself, I realized that this entire house was a monument to my former life, which only made my pain worse. He had to disappear. That same Friday evening, I drove to a nearby U-Haul store where I purchased a dozen large moving packing boxes, as well as other packing materials. I then rented an enclosed U-Haul trailer and brought it home. I went into Cheryl's room and started packing all of her things into boxes, using my natural Tetris engineering skills to make the most of the available space. I had no idea that a 17-year-old girl could have so many clothes. I carefully folded and packed everything, including her curtains. Once everything was packed and taped, I began to dismantle all the furniture in her room and carried each piece onto the trailer using a hand truck. There were two things from her room that I didn't pack. One of them is her cell phone, and the other is a special book of philosophers that Wesley gave her as a high school graduation gift. I'm sure they wanted her to take it with her since it was special to him, but she buried it in the trash can in her room under other trash. I chuckled at her cunning. God, how I miss this girl. I threw this book away along with the rest of the trash. Once everything was loaded, I placed all the boxes of her things in the trailer along with the furniture. Sharon was right. It looks like Cheryl didn't take many things from her past life with her, not even her underwear. Surprisingly, I never found the laptop and scientific calculators I gave her. I wondered if she was forced to return them or sell them. I tried not to think. Thinking leads to pain. It was midnight when I finished. Cheryl's room and closet were empty. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. I fell onto the bed in the guest bedroom and slept like the dead. I will never sleep in the bed I shared with Sharon again. On Saturday morning, I showered, shaved, and made myself breakfast. I tried to use up items in the refrigerator before they spoiled. By mid-morning, I found myself at a nearby storage unit where I had rented a space big enough for all of Cheryl's things. I asked myself 1,000 times why I kept her things. I didn't have a good answer. I just wanted to do it. I didn't have this attitude towards the rest of my family. Getting rid of their things in the future would be easy enough if I made that decision. Once I returned the trailer to U-Haul, I picked up some local flyers at the grocery store that advertised local apartments for rent. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had signed a lease for a monthly apartment a few miles from my place of work. Not wanting to sit alone in an empty house, I went to dinner at a decent family restaurant and went to see 2 films in a row at the cinema. It was 11 p.m. when I returned to the guest bedroom. I had a restless night as my thoughts returned to the confrontation. To erase the memories of this day, I would gladly give a leg. After preparing breakfast for myself on Sunday morning, I loaded my car with my clothes and personal items and moved it all into my furnished apartment. It took me 3 trips to move everything I wanted to keep. Of course, I didn't take with me a single thing that Sharon had ever bought. All this was left in the bedroom. It was good for my state of mind, and it was part of my strategy for recovering from such a terrible loss that no one but me was mourning. I called my boss on Monday morning, asking for a week off due to an urgent family matter. I had a 6-week vacation, so there were no problems. After preparing the last breakfast in the refrigerator, I went about my business. My first to-do item was calling 3 agencies: Goodwill, the Salvation Army, and Habitat for Humanity. I told them that due to a tragic loss in the family, everything in the house was given out on a first-come, first-served basis. The organizations could take anything and everything from the house without restrictions, and I hoped that they would completely empty the house. It took several trips and 3 days, but all the furniture, appliances, and most clothes were gone. I donated all the food I didn't take into my apartment to a local food bank. On Thursday, I made an appointment with the cleaning service to remove everything left behind as trash. They brought in a full 4-person crew on Thursday and Friday to clean the house inside and out. During the spring cleaning, I took Sharon's car to the car market and sold it. Of course, Cheryl's expensive Audi didn't stay in the house. On Friday morning, a realtor recommended to me by my colleague Robert inspected the house and listed it for sale. She offered to make the house more marketable, but I just wanted to get rid of it and told her to get a better price for a quick sale. After canceling service on their 4 phones, I stopped by a local domestic violence shelter and donated Sharon, Conrad, and Jocelyn's phones. They will be used as emergency telephone numbers for women who have been threatened or abused. For unknown reasons, I was never able to part with Cheryl's phone. I left it in my apartment. I thought about changing my number, but decided not to. If kids want to contact me for any reason, I want to be available. It was a cathartic experience for me. Everything that reminded me of my former life was systematically dismantled and removed. I was exhausted. Mental exercises required a lot of strength. I decided to crash on the couch for the weekend and watch some mindless entertainment on TV. After dinner, I decided to listen to Cheryl's phone to feel at least a little closer to her. Like the others, Sharon erased all photos, texts, and contact numbers from her phone. However, she missed a folder that contained about 20 of Cheryl's favorite songs, saved directly as MP3 music files that did not rely on the internet or connection. I thought of including a few bars of each, imagining us listening to them together. These were songs by popular artists of that time. When I started playing the song called Quandary, I was shocked to hear Cheryl's voice speaking to me. "Hey, Dad, no matter what you think, I love you more than anything in this world. Mom read us all the arrangement about how everything was going to happen when you faced this. We were all forced to beg you to let Wesley adopt us, all of us. I don't want this. I don't want to leave you, and I don't want to leave our house, but I have my own reasons for this. I can't say what they are, in case my mother finds this message. My whole life betraying you, but I will fix it if it's the last thing I do." Cheryl's voice began to tremble with tears. "I love you forever, Daddy. I'm still a daddy's girl. She loves me." My precious daughter still loves me. I cried a lot as the wounds reopened. However, her words were like a salve for my soul. I knew that I would never stop loving her either. I have no idea what she thinks she can do to fix the situation. I mean, she's a smart girl with an indomitable spirit, but what can a 17-year-old do? I just want her to be safe and happy. It is my greatest wish to see her again. I returned to work on Monday. Robert and I had lunch together, and I told him about the tragedy that had become my life. He is a good person and probably my best friend. He wasn't surprised at how quickly I finished the house because he is also a highly skilled engineer, but he was amazed at the cruel, narcissistic way in which Sharon abandoned me and took the children away. 10 days later, I had an offer to buy a house. I accepted it to get permission. After paying off the small remaining mortgage, I ended up with $307,000. Robert gave me great advice. I met with a financial advisor who helped minimize the tax burden on the $3 million I recently deposited into my account. There's no way to stop the IRS from taking some of it, but through the purchase of municipal bonds and a few other investments, he helped me save the bulk. The money from the sale of the house was transferred into a new mortgage, but I had a deadline to invest in my new home to avoid capital gains tax. It looks like you took the best steps you could on the financial front, Keith. I'm glad things worked out for you, Robert said. Thanks to you, Robert. You gave me wise advice, and I appreciate it. I'm happy to help my friend any way I can, and in return, I hope you can do me a favor. Of course, Robert, just tell me what you need. That's my wife, Doris, you know. When she has an idea, she won't rest until she gets it done. What do you mean? She wants you to come over for dinner this Saturday. From what you told me, Doris is a great cook. I'd love to join you, thanks for the invitation. She's the best cook I know, but that's not the problem, Keith. She wants to set me up like a lamb to the slaughter. Oh, that's it. Her sister Dawn. She'll be there too. My wife wants to set you up, and I don't like it. But she won't let me rest until I convince you to join us for dinner. Oh, I see, I chuckled. You know full well that I have absolutely no interest in a new relationship. My last relationship turned me into coal. But before I get a stomach virus and can't visit, what can you tell me about her? As for looks, she's stunningly beautiful. She has a good job as a lawyer. She's divorced, doesn't have kids, and is, say, 5 years younger than you. Sounds perfect, but I feel like you're saying, but what's the catch? You're right, Keith. I'm not going to lie to you. To be honest, she's very broken, very much. She's been recovering from her injuries for almost 2 years now. I've told Doris about your situation, and she thinks you both might be able to help each other heal. You were both betrayed and deceived. Honestly, I'm not sure it's a bad idea, but I don't like to interfere. Doris has no such hesitation. I don't want you to suffer because of me, Robert. If it helps you get rid of her, tell Doris I'll be there on Saturday, but it'll just be one time, right? She's not going to try to get us together again. And again? No, I'll make sure it's just this one time. Dawn is probably even less inclined to do it than you are. Doris will have to work hard to convince her to come at the same time, but I have no doubt that she will do it. If Dawn comes, I will treat her with nothing less than respect. I already know this about you, Keith, which is why I trust you with my daughter-in-law. What's her story? I'm afraid I can't tell you. It's her story that she has to share with herself. Just like Doris, and I didn't tell her your story. We respect you both too much. But if you ask her politely, she might reveal it to you. This. Okay, what time on Saturday? At 6:30. And Keith, if you do this for me, I'll owe you one. Thanks for taking the pressure off me, he laughed. I was apprehensive about returning to the dating world. I don't know how she did it, but Doris convinced Dawn to come to the party. We were introduced to each other by Robert and Doris at the same time. She was very sweet with that girl next door look. During dinner, Doris and Robert asked Dawn and me pointed questions to which they already knew the answers, but which revealed interesting details about each other. By the time dinner was over, The awkwardness seemed to have subsided. We realized that none of us were monsters and nothing bad would happen that night. The matchmakers insisted that we sit and talk in the living room while they washed the dishes. I could have washed each plate 3 times, dried them, and put them away during the time they had been dragging out their absence for our benefit. I hope I'm not the ogre Robert and Doris made me out to be, I joked. And I hope you don't think I came here on a broomstick, she replied humorously. I'd tell you about my work as a lawyer, but explaining patent law to an outsider is like watching paint dry for fun. I'm afraid my job as a rocket scientist is made even more boring by the constant calculations required, I replied. Doris and Robert are wonderful and have the best intentions. I'm sure they'll be questioning both of us tomorrow after our meeting. Well, why don't we hold off on our reports until we have a chance to have a real first date? Is that what you're willing to do? I asked, crossing my fingers. Her smile said it all. I would like to. Can you pick me up tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. and take me to church and then have lunch together? Her request made me jump, as if from awakening. Just send me the address and I'll come, I said optimistically. What surprised me about her invitation was that before meeting Sharon, I went to church fairly regularly. My parents raised me in the faith, and I attended services off and on even in college until Sharon came into my life. I suddenly realized that I had allowed her to seduce me and drive me away from the church. Because of her fascination with secular philosophy, Sharon was a strong believer agnostic, and unfortunately it affected me too. The realization that I needed to return to church came to me like a revelation. We attended the service together, and I put my arm around her back. The singer asked us to open hymnals to a song I knew well, and it hit me between the eyes. His 4 daughters died at sea in a shipwreck during a strong storm. His wife Anna was found holding the bar and rescued. Having received a message from Anna, he immediately went to her. One day, while traveling, the captain invited him to the bridge of the ship. He explained that at the moment they were passing over exactly the place where his daughters died. He returned to his cabin and wrote the following words. When the world, like a river, meets my path, when sorrows roll in like sea waves, no matter what happens, you taught me to say, everything is fine with my soul. All is well with my soul, all is well with my soul. It was not lost on me that Horatio Spafford lost his 4 daughters. I recently lost 3 children and my wife. Instead of cursing God, his faith enveloped his broken heart in a love and peace that surpasses all understanding. My eyes opened to a realization that had eluded me for far too long as the fog gathered around my broken heart. I sang this song with the crowd with great pleasure. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I say friendship because neither of us was ready to make any kind of commitment, given our similar histories. When we started dating seriously, we both believed that our relationship was exclusive, although we did not verbally discuss it. After 2 months of enjoying each other's company, I finally found the courage to ask her. I know that everything we've shared so far hasn't been too close. I'm not pressuring you in any way. What I mean is that I feel close enough to ask you about your story. Are you ready to share with me now? She looked deep into my eyes. I wanted them to have compassion, and I found it. You first. If you tell me your story, then I'll tell you mine. Okay, I replied. I told her the highlights of my life from the first time I met Sharon until the day she and the kids walked out of my life. And that's why it would be hard for me to trust another woman. I know not all women are like Sharon, but she broke something inside of me that hasn't fully healed yet. Dawn's eyes filled with tears as I shared my story of suffering. What a cruel and callous betrayal. Sharon is an evil, mean woman. I'm sorry that you were used like that, Keith, and then abandoned when things went south for them. No one deserves what they did to you. I'm sorry. I'm getting better day by day, and honestly, you're helping me a lot. Okay, you've heard my story, now it's your turn. With these words, she smiled a pale smile. I realized that this would be painful for her, so I took her hand for support. I was married for 11 years to Rex Garrett. We were madly in love and happy for the first few years. Our only point of contention was the level of intimacy. He had a healthy appetite for sex, much more than I did. As an obedient wife, I tried to satisfy all his needs, but in the end, it became a terrible responsibility for me, and this, unfortunately, began to manifest itself. I did not want this, but I had no choice. After our 10th anniversary, he decided that we need to open up our marriage and expand our horizons. I squeezed her hand for support, imagining where this could lead. She told a very sad story. Her ex-husband put illegal substances in her alcohol and forced her to do disgusting things with other men. Dawn cried, remembering this event. The memories of the meeting were very painful for her. I would never do this, I swear. I wasn't raised that way. But at that moment, he took control of me. When I started to come to my senses, I saw Rex checking his phone. He recorded the whole scene. I thought that I would become bad and wanted to leave immediately, but he insisted. He said that since I got what I had, now it was his turn. He contacted 2 other women at the same time. She continued her story. After that night, Rex became obsessed with humiliating and abusing me with other men. I couldn't take it anymore. I left him and filed for divorce. He threatened me, saying that he owned me and that he would never won't let me go. Doris and Robert graciously allowed me to stay with them while I was divorcing Rex. Robert never allowed Rex into the house while I was there with them. He is a wonderful man and a protective brother-in-law. The divorce was ultimately approved against my wishes. Rex. Dawn paused to take a sip of water before continuing. Unfortunately, this is not the end of my story. I wish I could. I met Dustin through a client of the law firm I was working for. We hit it off immediately. There was something about the chemistry we had between us. He was very kind and compassionate. He seemed to be everything that Rex was not, and I began to trust him with my heart. It seemed that everything with him was destined. 9 months later, he proposed to me, and we set a wedding date. I looked forward to an idyllic life with him. She continued. Dustin texted me one afternoon asking me to meet him at the hotel restaurant. I didn't know if I trusted him at the time, but he put something in my drink. When I became lethargic and couldn't resist, acting like a perfect gentleman, he helped me up, took me into the elevator and into the hotel room I had reserved, where he carefully laid me on the bed. Then his manner suddenly changed to aggressive. He showed me 3 candid photographs of the evening that Rex had arranged. He spluttered as he spoke, that my sexual contact with this man happened only 3 days ago, and that he had just found out about it. He insulted me, called me derogatory names, and declared that he could never marry someone like me, and he left everything. What I said, he decided it was all over. Of course, I immediately recognized the person in the photos as the one I was with at the club with Rex before we broke up. Rex printed those photos and gave them to Dustin to break up our engagement, and it worked. My downfall was that I didn't tell Dustin about that night because I was so ashamed and disgusted, but that happened long before I met Dustin, and it shouldn't have mattered. Dawn's tears intensified as I expected the worst. As soon as Dustin slammed the door behind him, Rex appeared and confessed his plan to ruin my relationship with Dustin and get me back. He reminded me that he owned me forever and was going to take control of my life that night. He explained that he had provided Dustin with a cocktail of substances for my drink so Dustin could get some revenge and leave me in my humiliated state. Dustin didn't know about Rex's plans for that night. 3 his friends used me while he was recording all this to blackmail me. He said he might publish the edited version online to make money. He called me his sex slave and expected me to fulfill all his demands from then on. I was devastated and felt broken on many levels. My fiancé not only believed the lie and ceremoniously dumped me, but also deceived and betrayed me in the worst possible way by setting this trap. I didn't see a way out. If I went to the police, it would only be my word against Rex's and would lead to nothing. My salvation came from an unexpected source. An unknown woman, who introduced herself as Ann Hardison, came to my office at the end of the day one work week, asking to meet me at a restaurant around the corner from my office as soon as I finished work. saying she had a treat for dinner and wanted to discuss something important. I didn't feel threatened since it was a public place, so I went. After ordering, she handed me a memory device, saying that there was a copy of the recording of what they did to me. It was there, not edited. Rex mistakenly provided an unedited copy. Clint, Anne's husband, and one of the three who did this to me. The video showed evidence that something had been slipped into my drink as four men discussed my deliberate incapacitation. The edited version has been stripped of all such conversations and evidence. Rex's threats to me were also included. She said she was divorcing her Clint because this was his second case of infidelity and she did not want to be married to a criminal. I took the evidence to the district attorney, who prosecuted them all. Rex received a 12-year prison sentence and is still behind bars. The rest received slightly shorter sentences. These experiences of betrayal and violence will never leave me, but I refuse to let them define me. I'm not the person Rex tried to turn me into. I saw how much Dawn was ashamed to share such intimate information about the tragedies she had experienced. The roles were reversed. Tears were now rolling down my cheeks for the mistreatment of this kind and wonderful woman who had endured so much. I'm so sorry, Dawn. I didn't know. You didn't deserve your fate any more than I deserved mine. Now I understand why Robert and Doris call us both broken souls. I was broken, but my faith helps me overcome the past and frees me from the chains that bound me. One day, the right person will see my true worth and integrity. I hope that day comes soon. She smiled at me as we wiped each other's tears. I hope so too, Dawn. As we grew closer, Dawn wanted to help me heal and leave the past behind me. Even though I knew in my heart it was the right thing to do, knowing what needed to be done and being able to do it were two different things. Dawn knew I loved the author K.S. Lewis. She reminded me of his words, "If you love deeply, you will suffer greatly, but it will still be worth it." I thought about it. It is true that before I was blinded, I deeply loved Sharon and all three children. At that time, I would have gladly given my life for any of them. But was it worth it? Do I really wish I had never met Sharon? Although I had wished for this hundreds of times since the confrontation occurred, I realized that I was happy throughout all those years, right up to the end. Does this really mean anything? I lived by the proverb, ignorance is bliss. This was definitely true in my case. Was my entire married life a waste of time? Even though it was based on lies and deceit, I was never unhappy if I was honest with myself. I realized that I was falling in love with Dawn. She never pressured me to move on from the past, just expressed a desire to help me through the healing that I knew I needed. We enjoyed each other on levels that I had never experienced with Sharon. Every day she slightly eroded the concrete that I surrounded my heart with for protection. The walls began to crumble and fall. We talked about our growing love, being open and honest every step of the way. There were no unspoken hidden feelings between us. This openness was like breathing in impossible air for a person drowning underwater. Dawn had a 2-year head start on me in overcoming the past. She had already told me that she loved me and convinced me that such a confession was a big step for her. I completely agreed with this. One day Dawn said to me, "Keith, I can only show you the door to love. You have to walk through it yourself." It reminds me of the old saying, Dawn, when one door closes, another opens. That's true, she replied, but there is a second part of this saying that is often forgotten. But we so often look so long and with such regret at closed doors that we do not see those that have opened for us. At that moment, the last of my resistance collapsed. I realized that I was holding myself back. I was allowing the pain of my past to get in the way of the joy of my future. Is this how I wanted to live the rest of my life? Absolutely not. I had to open my heart to love again and learn to trust. I needed to trust Dawn the same way she had learned to trust me. I had finally overcome the self-built barrier to happiness and was now confidently walking towards it. From then on it was Dawn and Keith, no holds barred. I was in love again, and I knew it. 5 months later, I proposed to her on one knee. Her answer made me the happiest person in the world. We set a wedding date in 6 months. Dawn helped me choose a 4-room house where we would begin our common journey. I put all the money from the sale of my old house into the new one with our significant down payment. Within 2 months, it was fully furnished. We decided to save our first sexual experience for our wedding night. Today, many may consider it old-fashioned, but it is what we both wanted. 4 months later, she had almost completely moved into our house. She only kept a minimal amount of stuff in her apartment, so she could spend the night and change there for work. But most of her stuff was already included in our home, and I really enjoyed having her around. Life was great again until one Friday afternoon when I received a mysterious message from Dawn. We have a reservation at the Carriage House restaurant for tonight at 5:30. If you leave work at 5 and hurry, you should be on time. Try not to be late. This is very important. We have only been to this restaurant once before. It was inconveniently far from our house, but offered an eclectic menu. I had no idea why she wanted me to meet her there today or why she was so insistent on the timing. Suddenly, a terrible premonition arose in my head, and I could not get rid of it. I wanted to dispel these thoughts of déjà vu as quickly as possible, so I replied to her message asking for more information, but there was no response. I tried to call her, but after a long ring the phone went to voicemail and my call went unanswered. I was on the verge of panic as parallels with Sharon's betrayal flashed through my mind. Could something like this happen to me again? As soon as 5:00 came, I ran out of the office and rushed to the appointed place. I arrived there 3 minutes before the appointed time. Luckily, Dawn was already sitting at the table waiting for me. Seeing her smile, I calmed down a little. I quickly joined her to find out what was going on. "I'll tell you all about it soon, Keith. Let's order first so we don't get distracted, and we can talk while we wait for the food." Her offer was reasonable. She asked me to order first since she was still choosing from the menu. After I finished, she ordered a surprising amount of food, enough for 2. "I missed lunch and I'm hungry," she explained. Since it was an expensive restaurant, I hoped she could eat everything. Dawn looked mysteriously at her watch without explaining why. Finally, my patience ran out, and I could not allow the unspoken purpose of today's meeting to remain unspoken. "What's going on, Dawn? You're scaring me. Are you going to betray me like Sharon did? Is your lover going to join us at the table? If that's what you ordered for extra food, I'm leaving right now," I blurted out. "Just wait 2 more minutes, Keith. Just 2 minutes, I'm not asking for more. But I want you to prepare for the shock of your life. Prepare, dear. You're about to get the biggest surprise." I was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. Has this become my life, a series of betrayals and soul-destroying revelations? I didn't need more. Dawn looked at me anxiously, expecting something I had no idea about. Then it happened. A figure walked up behind me and sat down at the table next to me. "Hello, Father." I couldn't believe my eyes. It was my daughter, Cheryl, I exclaimed, jumping up and hugging her. Although she tried to contain her emotions, we both cried openly in our arms, holding each other tightly. Not only us, but Dawn also teared up seeing how much it meant to both of us. I kissed Cheryl's teary cheeks. But these were tears of joy, not suffering, and I would choose these tears any day of the week and twice as many on Sunday. At that moment, the waiter awkwardly approached our table. I should have known that the extra food Dawn ordered was everyone's favorite food from Cheryl. I was ready to find out what factors contributed to this reunion. "I can't tell you how glad I am to see you again, Cheryl. I thought I might have lost you forever. And how did you know Dawn? She found you and orchestrated all this. Forgive me, where are my manners? Let me make the proper introductions. Cheryl, this is Dawn Garrett, my fiancée, and Dawn, this is Cheryl, I'm guessing Stanton now. Dawn and I have already dated, and no, Dad, my last name is still Cheryl Carlisle and will remain that way until I get married. I never took his last name." "What? But how is this possible? They insisted that I sign all the papers for all 3 of you." "It's true, and after he and Mom got married, Wesley's main goal was to legally adopt all 3 of us and give us his last name. I agreed to avoid constant arguing with them. When our case went before the judge, because of our age, the judge asked each of us to meet with him separately in his office. As you can guess, Conrad and Jocelyn both agreed to the adoption and change of name. Mom and Wesley brainwashed them into believing that now that our family was finally in collection and a last name change is a necessity to facilitate and secure our future inheritance. When the judge personally asked me about adoption and a last name change, I clearly told him that I would rather die than become a Stanton, and that I would find a way to kill myself if that was the case. There will be coercion against my will. The judge, fortunately, believed me and allowed me to stay. Of course, Mom and Wesley were furious with me for several days, but I stood my ground. They threatened to cut me out of the will and deprive me of my future. Inheritance. I told them I didn't care. I love you more than anyone in the world, and I'm still Daddy's girl, she smiled. I was amazed by her deviant story and was very proud of her. What about a restraining order? Will we get in trouble for meeting tonight? I don't care, but I don't want you to get in trouble for it. I found out later that the restraining order was only in effect for 30 days, Dad. Wesley was just bluffing. Then why didn't you contact me sooner? Why did you wait so long? For 2 reasons. I knew I needed to be on the inside with them to put myself in a position where I could get as much dirt on them as possible. Secondly, Wesley and Mom made it clear to me that if I ever contacted you for any reason, they both vowed to destroy you financially and fire you from your job. I knew they were closely monitoring all my communications. They threatened to hire hackers to drain you of every penny you earned and fire you. I couldn't risk you getting hurt because of me, so I had to wait until today. Why now? What has happened, my dear, since the day we parted, and what circumstances allowed you to be here today? I'll try to tell you the short version of what I did. As for the time today, I'll tell you my part, and then Don will fill in. Don's in on this too? I asked, surprised. Yes, Dad, I'll start. The night we left you alone in the house so Mom and Wesley could chase their dreams after playing for a long time, we flew to Dallas, Texas for a memorial service for the Stanton family and decided to stay in Dallas at the mansion. The thought of leaving you behind and having fun in this huge mansion in the summer with these 2 weirdos didn't appeal to me. They knew I wasn't happy and getting me on their side would be a difficult task. I asked Wesley to help me get a job at Clinard Pharmaceuticals, a company they controlled a large stake in, and he was happy to get me a job as an intern in one of their labs. I was only 17, but I kept my eyes and ears open to find out how, as much as possible about the operation of the enterprise. Working full-time, I mostly avoided their attention. They spent most of the summer entertaining and buying things for the twins, which seemed to irritate them. I was a freshman at Georgia Tech that fall and was thrilled, even though I was always the youngest student in all my classes. Thank you again, Dad, for your support. Wesley and Mom insisted I take my graduation gift with me. Audi R8 GT. I initially liked this car when it was given to me, and I became very attached to it after breaking up with you. I realized that they were using it as a baby rattle to distract my attention and make me happy with them. I quickly warmed up to it. Wesley delivered it to me at Georgia Tech. Since the car was registered only to me, I traded it in at the Atlanta car dealership, which gave me $220,000 for it. I left the dealership on a 2-year-old Buick Encore, costing less than $25K. That left me with $195K in my bank account for my needs. I decided not to tell them what I did with the Audi. Anyway, I got a part-time job at a local Costco store nearby that fit my schedule and did not interfere with studies. I didn't go back to Dallas to spend Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, or spring break with them using work as an excuse. They didn't want me to work and offered to send me money. I said I'd donate it to charity. If they did this, and explained that I wanted to earn my own living, as was required of Wesley, they were very upset that I did not come home. The only trip they insisted on was the court hearing. Adoption. They sent me back and forth on a corporate jet, and as I said, they were very unhappy that I refused to adopt and change my last name. After my first year of college, I parked my car for the summer and they sent me away, back to Dallas. At that time, I was already 18, and my first year of study was behind me. I asked to work as an assistant to Dave Wilkins, managing director of all projects at Clinard Pharmaceuticals. He was a bachelor, and we started dating, although he was 12 years older than me. I understood that he wanted me for my youth, my appearance, and most importantly, because I was the daughter of his boss. Marrying me would strengthen his long-term prospects and position in the company. But don't worry, Dad, although we kissed, I explained to him that I didn't want to have sex before marriage. He reluctantly agreed, hoping to avoid Wesley's wrath by going against his daughter's wishes. Please bear with me, Dad. I'm getting to the fun part. The breakthrough came one evening about 2 months into the summer. Dave and I were at his house drinking wine and watching a movie on his impressive home theater system. He was a connoisseur of fine wines and invited me to try the different drinks he had. I pretended to enjoy the wine, but in fact I poured out my glass when he was not looking. He continued to fill our glasses until he himself became drunk. I began to ask him innocent questions about the developed ones, company of drugs, and the processes that led to their approval and release. He felt comfortable with me in the confines of his home, and the wine weakened his tongue. I interrogated him unobtrusively, pretending to be just curious, since he knew that I was Wesley's daughter. He felt safe divulging to me some of the company's secrets that Wesley assumed he knew anyway. Dave was drunk when he admitted that the company's two most profitable drugs initially had serious problems in the testing stage. He admitted that the trial data had been altered to obtain FDA approval. He did not have access to the original data, but a former senior employee was fired when he tried to raise the alarm. There was a trial that ended with a settlement agreement with non-disclosure of all details. Wesley's parents took an active part in this process. Dave continued to randomly try to remember until he finally remembered the man's name, Hukulam. I hope you don't mind, Dad, but I've been following you on a phone finder app. I'm glad you didn't change your number. I noticed that you are spending time in an apartment rented on Dawn Garrett. Out of curiosity, I wanted to know who this woman my dad was spending time with. I looked her up on Google and found that she was a lawyer. Her work number was listed on the website of the law firm Grayland, Long and Kirby, so I called her and introduced myself. She knew who I was by how much you told her about me. I was amazed to learn that she specializes in patent law, particularly drug patents. Hesitantly, I told her my story, Cheryl finished. That's where I came into play, Dawn interjected. Now, before you get mad at me for keeping quiet, Keith, Cheryl came to my office and hired me as her lawyer, using the attorney-client privilege. I was legally unable to share information about her or her affairs with you without risk. Lose your license. Cheryl interjected. True, and besides, I didn't want you to relive old wounds until everything was settled and resolved. Carry on, Dawn. As a lawyer, I have experience finding people with the help of a private investigator. Within 2 days, I received Hugh Kellum's file. When I contacted him, he refused to come to my office, so I had to go to him. He was very reserved about for a non-disclosure agreement and showed me a copy of it, which stated that he was prohibited from talking to anyone about his previous work at Clinard Pharmaceuticals, except for direct employees of the company. Although I was an attorney, he could not legally talk to me. But I knew Cheryl could, so I took her to his house, where she confirmed her status as an employee and then recorded his statement. Cheryl continued the conversation. He was glad he could legally share his story without risking jail time. Hugh was central to both projects. Initial drug trials showed an increased risk of heart attacks. Not wanting to delay lucrative products from coming to market because of necessity back to the development stage, Clinard Pharmaceuticals bribed an FDA official to close his eyes and take changed data for obtaining approval and bringing drugs to market. Initial studies showed that several trial participants died from heart attacks, but these cases were never linked to the drugs. Once the drugs were approved by the FDA and marketed, all subsequent heart attacks were attributed to other causes because the drugs were cleared by the FDA. Hugh had the original test documents as well as copies corrected documentation confirming fraud. Dawn convinced him that he could legally give these documents to me as an employee of Clinard Pharmaceuticals. He believed me when I explained that I wanted to get justice. Dawn resumed the conversation. After Cheryl gave me the files she had collected, I contacted the Department of Justice, which enthusiastically began an investigation into the alleged fraud and attempted to identify all culprits within the FDA. Wanting to minimize the risks to current users of the two drugs, the Department of Justice expedited your investigation, confirmed that the allegations merited prosecution, and quickly filed criminal charges against Clinard Pharmaceuticals. While Clinard was preparing for her defense, details of the upcoming trial were leaked on Wall Street, causing investors to become reluctant to invest. The company's shares quickly lost value, turning Clinard Pharmaceuticals into a company with shares worth pennies. Naturally, a class action lawsuit ensued against Clinard Pharmaceuticals on behalf of all the families of heart attack victims who took these drugs. My law firm was more than happy to represent them. The pharmaceutical company's trunks were empty, Keith. Your daughter single-handedly destroyed the entire Stanton empire. I was amazed at the revelations that the two women alternated with me. It never occurred to them that karma would deal such a devastating blow to them. As much as I'm glad they failed, they still live in million-dollar mansions and have planes, yachts, and expensive cars. I don't think they'll suffer much from the lawsuit. Oh, but I haven't told you the best part yet, Dad. As an insider, I learned that the pharmaceutical company owned all the residences, yachts, planes, and cars through a shell company for tax purposes. The judge hearing the case ordered Clinard Pharmaceuticals to liquidate everything assets to allocate funds for the settlement. Wesley and Mom were given a week to leave the entire property, and they were quickly evicted. Essentially, Wesley and Mom were left penniless and homeless. They moved into a small apartment with Conrad and Jocelyn. My job illustrating children's books for a living, and my mom got her first job as a waitress at a local steakhouse. As for me, I'm safe and living in my dorm in Georgia Tech. Now, I don't want to upset you by finding out that I am similar to Mom in one aspect. Just like her, I played the long game. I'm wondering if you have a preference for where you would like me to call my home, Dad. I have always been, am, and will be Dad's daughter. My love for you transcends any genetic or biological ties. I hugged my girl and happily accepted her back to your life. You will always be home with me, Cheryl, with us, I said affirmatively, taking Dawn's hand and nodding my head in agreement. Both of our faces were washed with tears as we hugged and kissed each other on the cheeks, not wanting this moment to ever pass. God, how I love this girl. Well, I need to be back on campus Sunday night, so I can be ready for classes on Monday. Dawn suggested that you might not mind if I spent the weekend with you before I fly out. As soon as this school year is over, I'll be back for the summer if you don't mind. This is more than normal, I insist. By the way, this guy Dave Wilkins, is he still in the game? Dave? He's a nice guy and actually a good kisser, but I'm not ready for a serious relationship yet. We broke up when the company went bankrupt and was sold. It seems like my quality as Wesley's daughter somehow lost its appeal for him. With me, it wasn't anything serious. I just needed to get closer to him to find a way to overthrow Wesley after they did this to you. Honestly, I don't want to see Wesley or Mom again, if you want to know the truth, but Conrad and I feel sorry for Jocelyn. Now that they've gone down a few notches, who knows what might happen. I enjoyed having my special daughter with me again. Now that she is 18, there are no questions about custody. She can live anywhere. We moved all of her old furniture and things I had stored into a room in our new house that she had chosen for herself. It was hard for me to watch her go back to Georgia Tech, but at the same time I was excited for her. Cheryl promised to come back every holiday. I told her that round-trip tickets would always be waiting for her. When Dawn and I finally got married, it was a wonderful experience for both of us. She had many colleagues, friends, and family as support. She even asked Cheryl to be her maid of honor. We spent a week on a cruise in the Western Caribbean for our honeymoon. We did not feel at all deprived, although we hardly left our cabin on the upper deck. If ever two souls were perfectly made for each other, it is us. Once Dawn and I settled into a daily routine and settled into life as husband and wife, new drama awaited us. During work hours, I received a call from an unknown number on my personal mobile phone. I don't usually answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from my doctor to schedule my annual physical. Hello, Keith. How are you? Sharon, you have the nerve to call me. Let me guess, you want me to donate a kidney to Wesley. I guess I deserve it, Keith. No, I'm not asking for anything for Wesley or myself. I'm asking for the kids, Conrad and Jocelyn. They miss you and your eldest daughter. The four of us would like to meet you at Angus Steakhouse Barn on Saturday at 18 at our expense. Invite Cheryl if she is in town. When you say four, does that include Mr. Stanton? Yes, of course, Wesley is my husband and their father in every sense of the word, so he will be there. That won't happen. If he's there, I won't be. It's as simple as that. I almost forgot how emotional and dramatic you are. I prefer pragmatism. It will be there. Then I won't. Goodbye, Sharon, and I ended the call. 30 minutes later, I received a call again from the same number. Please don't hang up on me, Keith. Wesley is generous enough to overlook your shortcomings for the sake of the children. So if you can't be in the same room with him, he won't be there for the sake of the twins. They want to see you. Will you come now, knowing that he will not be there? I thought before answering. The only thing I know for sure is that you are both certified liars. I don't trust a word you say. I'll be there, but if he shows up for even a minute, I'll leave. Understood. It's a shame you can't get over your ego, but if that's the case, yes, that's understandable. He won't be there. Conrad and Jocelyn are looking forward to seeing you. Will Cheryl be there too? I'd really like to see her. We didn't break up on very good terms, I'm afraid. She's studying for her exams and will be out of town this weekend. Sorry. I see. She's a smart girl, and I'm proud of her. I'll see you Saturday night then. Dawn and I discussed the upcoming event. She believed that Sharon had an ulterior motive for contacting me, beyond the twins' supposed burning desire to see me, which she questioned given everything I had told her. I agreed with her and asked her to accompany me for moral support. She agreed to come and support me because she wanted to meet the most incredible slut she had ever heard of. When we walked into the steakhouse, Jocelyn and Conrad rushed to greet me with hugs. It seemed discreet, as if it had been pre-planned. Perhaps I was too suspicious because of the way we broke up. Hello, Keith. I assume you are Dawn, his wife? Sharon greeted us both politely. The twins sat on either side of their mother, opposite Dawn and me. Sharon, I offered briefly. It's good of you to come. The twins are very happy to contact you again, she lied. After that, Conrad and Jocelyn started sharing their interests and how much they both missed me from that day and how they wanted me to continue to stay in touch with them. They were both almost 17, 2 years younger than Cheryl, whom they asked about. I good-naturedly conveyed that Cheryl loved them very much and missed her little brother and sister, which made them happy. After the waiter took the orders, Sharon revealed her real intentions for inviting me. I'm not sure how much of our history you've heard, Keith, but our family situation has changed significantly since the last time we spoke. After a series of very unfortunate circumstances, the Stanton family capital was completely depleted. After everything settled down, we found ourselves without any financial means and no place to live. Wesley resumed his work as a children's book illustrator, while I, with no work experience other than being a housewife and raising our family, well, I work here at this steakhouse as a waitress. I have a discount as an employee, and therefore I can afford to invite you tonight, she offered modestly. Given that Sharon did not slander Cheryl and Dawn, it seemed to me that she did not know that they were involved in their financial collapse, and I was not going to divulge that information. I've heard some things on the news, Sharon, but I'm sure I don't know all the details. It must be tragic to lose everything you've worked towards your whole life, I said, meaning it with a double meaning. She glanced sideways at me, but I made no further comment. It seemed to me that she didn't want to upset me, so she ignored my barb. Wesley and I will manage, but my main concern is Conrad and Jocelyn. They are at an age where they need to plan for their college education, but given our financial situation, it pains me to say that we are no longer able to do so. For them, I remember that you saved money over the years not only for Cheryl's education, but also for the twins. Plus, I remember that you received a $3 million severance package when we ended our marriage, that you are financially able to provide $250,000 each to Conrad and Jocelyn, just as you provided to Cheryl, who is now enjoying your investment. Unfortunately, their grades do not qualify them for scholarships. You were a significant part of their lives until recently. Keith, don't you think it's time to bury the hatchet and do what's right for these two wonderful children? I know you still have love in your heart for them. I always believed that. Dawn squeezed my hand to reassure me. She knew my volcano was about to erupt. I wanted to tell Sharon everything I could, but not in front of the twins. That's probably why she brought them with her, relying on my feelings for them to keep me in line. I took a break to pull myself together. Sharon mistook my silence for thoughtfulness. I didn't look at Sharon or the twins. I looked at Dawn, the love of my life. She understood my gaze for what it was, seeking her opinion. She smiled in gratitude. Whatever you decide, honey. I'm with you 100%, Dawn interjected. Sharon perked up when she heard Dawn agree. After taking a deep breath, I decided to make my proposal. You're right, Sharon. I still have feelings for them, even though they both chose to cut me out of their lives. But that doesn't mean I don't have compassion. I have an offer to support them and fully fund their higher education, however. My offer comes with 4 unavoidable conditions. First, you and Wesley must both relinquish all parental rights and transfer both children to me in their entirety for $1 each. This is madness, Sharon exclaimed, trying to maintain her composure. They only have 2 years left until they reach adulthood. What difference does it make? Wesley will never agree to this. But out of curiosity, what are the other 3 conditions? Second, they will both move in with Dawn and me and live at our house as their only residence until they graduate from college. Third, they can choose any field of study they want, with the exception of philosophy. If either of them wants a degree in philosophy, then he will pay for it himself. And lastly, neither of them should have any contact with you or Wesley until the day of their graduation. I will allow you both to be there and witness their graduation, but if anyone, then one of you, for some reason, contacts them before this time, or vice versa, then the deal will fall through, the funding will stop. Yes, I know that at 18 they will be adults and will be able to make their own decisions, but if one of them will contact you, the consequences will come immediately, all funding will stop. That's all the conditions, take it or leave it. To hell with you, Keith. You can keep your bourgeois philosophy and your money. My children will never submit to your imperial demands. There is no chance that we will agree to even one of your outrageous and unreasonable demands. You manipulated me like a Stradivarius for 17 years, Sharon. Never again. Dawn is my life now. Jocelyn, Conrad, I still love you both. I wish you all the best for the future. Come on, Dawn, I said, getting up from at the table. I lost my appetite. I left $100 bill on the table to cover the cost of our meals, and we left without another word. 3 weeks later, my phone rang again. Hi, Keith. We've had a lot of discussions about your proposal, and maybe we can come to an agreement on all the points except the no contact clause. It would be difficult for me not to have contact with them for 4 or 5 long years after I was with them every day since they were born. Can you remove this condition, or at least modify it to allow some basic contact between us during this time without jeopardizing funding for their education? Hello, Sharon. To be honest, I didn't expect a call from you. Regarding your question of the 4 conditions, this is the one that I consider the most important. In my opinion, it would be better for them to completely disown you and your influence. This will give them a chance to resume normal thinking. No, Sharon. No contact, 0, none, as I said earlier, take it or leave it. She hung up. This made me chuckle. 2 weeks after that call, I received another one. She sounded defeated. Hello, Keith. I want you to know that I hate you for insisting on your petty demands on the children you helped raise for 15 years. But their father and I love them more than our own pride. We're willing to be practical and put our feelings aside for the sake of the twins' well-being until they graduate from college. What date do you want them to move in with you? Let them finish the current school year with you and celebrate this day together. I will come the next day and pick them up. That way, they will have the summer to get used to their new surroundings before starting their last year of school living with us. I won't ask you for a penny to support them. 4 years after graduation, they will receive their diplomas and be ready for the adventures we call life. Can we do the paperwork at our home? It would be humiliating enough without having to be in the office with a public notary to do the paperwork. I wanted to remind her of the humiliation they deliberately inflicted on me that day, but I restrained myself. Dawn happens to be a notary, but she technically can't notarize documents for her husband. I'll arrange for another notary to come to your apartment on the day I pick them up. Unlike you, I won't demand the twins leave everything behind. Let them pack whatever they want to take with them. I will provide for their every need from that day until they graduate from college. Make sure Conrad and Jocelyn sign the adoption papers when they appear before the judge, unless they convince him of their wishes. Be adopted, they will be returned to you without tuition funding. This is part of the deal. She sighed. We understand, Keith. The kids know what they need to say and do to make it work for them. They won't fight back like Cheryl. I still hate you for doing this. I know, Sharon, and I'm completely comfortable with it. A week after my local school graduation, Sharon contacted me one last time after the final celebration marking the start of the 5-year no-contact period and tearfully told me I could complete the paperwork and take it with me. Dawn knew a bank teller who was a notary. We paid him extra to meet us at their apartment at 2:15 p.m. to complete the paperwork. We arrived at 14 to discuss the documents before signing. Like Sharon, Wesley looked defeated. His long-term dream of living on a grand scale turned into failure too quickly. It was humiliating for them. I wondered what philosophy they followed to cope with the new reality. 2 of the documents we discussed were standard waivers of parental rights that would allow me to adopt them both and gain full custody of each child, which would include changing their last name back to Carlisle. They both understood that they would need to sign these documents in front of a notary. The third document was extremely petty on my part, and I thought it might be a stumbling block for Wesley, but I submitted it anyway. It stated that they both admitted that they were selling their rights to their 2 children for the sum of $1 for each child. It had no legal meaning, but I wanted it for myself after they made me pay $1 million for each child. The fourth duplicate document clearly stated the no-contact clause, as well as where the twins would live until they graduated from college. I wanted them to know what any violation of this condition would cost their children. What if one of Sharon's parents gets cancer or dies? Shouldn't there be exceptions? Asked Wesley, disappointed. If something like this happens, there is nothing stopping you from contacting me. If I think it's important enough, I'll pass it on, I confirmed. Other than that, do you have any questions? They both nodded sadly in understanding. When the notary arrived, it was a quiet affair. He came and went in less than 10 minutes. After symbolically leaving 2 $1 bills on the table, I collected the documents in a folder and gave them to Dawn for safekeeping. I carried their bags out to the car as Sharon and Wesley said tearful goodbyes to the 2 teenagers. They were silent on the way home, but it was obvious that they were upset. When we arrived, but before we got out of the car, Conrad said, "If you loved us, you wouldn't have put us through all this drama." It's because I love you that I started all this fuss. Hopefully, with time, you'll be able to look at it more broadly. What do you expect us to call you? Something respectful. You don't have to call me Dad like you've done for 15 years. You can call me Keith or Sir. You can call her Dawn or Mrs. However, I won't tolerate disrespect. I don't expect you to be happy for now. Just be respectful. Do you think you can handle this? They both nodded. Nothing more was said that could be construed as confrontation. They happily met Cheryl and were excited to see their big sister again. Jocelyn chose the room closest to Cheryl, and Conrad took the one at the end of the hallway. I assumed they would keep to themselves for a while. I understood that they were unhappy with my interference in their lives, but I believed that my investment in their education could serve as a lever for stabilization after their mother's indoctrination. At dinner that night, I explained to the twins that Cheryl would be taking them to a psychiatrist once a week to help them sort through their feelings and cope with the turmoil that had been in their lives since the discovery of their birth parents. I knew that Dr. Kersey Edgerton, a psychiatrist, would have a difficult task, but she came as a recommendation. I decided not to delay the adoption process. In anticipation of their moving to me, I instructed my lawyer to put our case on the agenda for the third week of the summer so that they would have time to adjust before meeting with the judge. As Sharon promised, the adoption process went smoothly. The children were very cooperative. I decided not to inform Sharon about the event, figuring it would not do any good to inform them of what they knew would happen. I got new ID cards for Conrad and Jocelyn Carlisle. The twins called me sir during their first year with us. Of course, Cheryl still called me daddy, but wisely did not insist that the twins follow her example. It also took time for us adults to adapt to new circumstances, moving from the freedom of life alone in the house to the presence of Cheryl, and then the twins, each adding their own dynamic. I decided that they should continue therapy for the first 2 years of college. They switched to another psychiatrist near Georgia Tech on the recommendation of Dr. Edgerton, but kept returning. That's right, thanks to Cheryl's encouragement, as well as Sharon and Wesley's influence, they both decided to study at Georgia Tech. Conrad, who was the most reluctant to adapt to living with me, decided that he wanted to study aerospace engineering. I was shocked when he announced this decision. I couldn't be prouder. Without explanation, Jocelyn chose chemical engineering, another challenging field. The summer after their freshman year at Georgia Tech was over, the ice was broken. Jocelyn called me daddy, just like Cheryl. I didn't say a word, but I hugged her the tightest. Conrad was the last one to give up, but he too resumed addressing me as dad before the start of the next school year. Dawn surprised me. I thought she would be overwhelmed by a house full of unbridled youth, but she rose to the challenge with flying colors, using her legal organizational skills to manage the house. She made us all follow the rules, but she did it with love. Although it was clear that the three had come to love and respect her in her role as my wife and their stepmother, they politely called her Dawn or yes ma'am in return. She was pleased. I believe that going to therapy regularly was one of the smartest decisions I made. The smartest thing was to marry Dawn. When Cheryl earned her engineering degree, she immediately took a job at Aerojet Rocketdyne to put her education to work alongside her botanist dad. She fit in perfectly and soon began dating Rory Shepak, a fellow engineer. 2 years later, we all got together again when Wesley and Sharon flew to Atlanta with us to see the twins graduate. It was a touching renewal of relationships on all sides, and Dawn and I gave them space to reconnect. Conrad and Jocelyn looked at me the entire time as Wesley and Sharon hugged them proudly. It was clear that the children recognized my role and place in their lives, despite their biological origins. I didn't know what would happen next after the graduation ceremony ended. Now everyone could do what they wanted. All three of my children were free to take their lives in any direction, and I was very proud that I could help them in their development. After spending a lot of time that afternoon and evening with Wesley and Sharon, Conrad and Jocelyn approached me to talk. "Well, we did it, Dad," she said happily. Jocelyn. "That's right," Conrad added. "We would never have achieved what we have done if it weren't for you, and we are both very grateful to you. You were our rock, along with Cheryl. Before they left them for you, Mom and Dad strongly insisted that we got a degree in philosophy and followed in their footsteps. We both had no interest in it, so we're glad you stopped it. What surprised us both was how you backed down and told us to choose our destiny and that you will support any of our career decisions. You have no idea how much this affected us. You were the same dad we knew and loved all our lives. You never changed, always supported us, never pressured us. followed your dreams, but gave us the freedom to follow our own dreams. You're the best dad in the world, Jocelyn added. That's why we chose the directions we did because of you. We both wanted to be like you and work with you. With my degree in chemical engineering, I hope to get a job at Aerojet Rocketdyne working on developing new chemical rocket engines. And considering how much Conrad talks to you about aerospace engineering, well, we're hoping to add 2 more Carlyles to their list. There are 2 questions you haven't asked us yet, Dad, but we both know you're wondering about them. But let me reassure you, no, we are not changing our last names back to Stanton. We are proud to be your children, both legally and emotionally. Secondly, our home is where you are. When we return, we would both like to continue living with you in our family until we start our own lives. We are not going to go back to live with Mom and Wesley. We will see them and visit them from time to time now that we have. These are our degrees. Although we will call them Mom and Dad, you will always be our dad. I hope that's okay with you. I had been moved to the point of tears up until this point, not knowing how they would react to me now that Wesley and Sharon were back in their lives. I was so relieved I started crying. I was not alone in my tears. Dawn and I embraced them in a big family hug. But it was inevitable that the name had to change. 9 months later, I proudly walked Cheryl down the aisle as she became Cheryl Shepak. She and Rory were an adorable couple. I felt that Dawn and I would soon be holding the titles of grandparents. Yes, Wesley and Sharon were there, but they knew better than to try to convince Cheryl to let Wesley walk her down the aisle. God, how I love this girl. The wedding went off without a hitch, as Conrad was Rory's best man and Jocelyn was her maid of honor. 2 years later, Jocelyn ran away to marry her fiancé. I'm sorry, Dad. Mom and Dad were very insistent that he be the one to walk me down the aisle instead of you. They said it was only fair since you were leading Cheryl. You know, I wouldn't make a problem out of it, honey. Whatever you decide, I'd be fine with it. You should have the right to have your wedding day go the way you want. You're right, Dad, and what I wanted most was peace and harmony. Running away with Carl made the choice unnecessary. I still love you, Dad. And I still love you, Jocelyn. If you or Carl ever need anything. I know, we'll call you, she said, teasingly but lovingly. Wesley and Sharon stubbornly stayed together, but Sharon became unhappy due to their constant financial struggles, which naturally made Wesley unhappy as well. Honestly, I wasn't surprised when Conrad casually mentioned that Wesley and Sharon were having affairs as a way to deal with their melancholy. Apparently, their pragmatism allowed them to be intimate with other partners as a practical solution, given their unusual philosophy of life. After all, he allowed her to be intimate with me for 17 years, being my lawful wife. None of the children could understand how they could live like this after I was a model to them, and that made me proud. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.